Chapter 206. Tan Zhongqi wanted to whet these people's appetites and create momentum for Qin Wushuang. He said to a servant beside him, "Go outside the palace and call Qin Wushuang in." That servant bowed and said, "Yes." Qin Wushuang? Each of these 12 core disciples showed a suspicious expression. Among them, a few had already heard that their teacher had taken in a direct disciple. Some of them were completely in the dark. Even for those who knew, they had never thought that this direct disciple was so powerful that he had the strength to aim for the top 10 core disciples. That servant walked out of the palace and raised his voice. "Please, senior brother Qin Wushuang, come in and meet our teacher." When Qin Wushuang heard his name being called, he smiled lightly and walked out calmly. He walked towards the palace at a neither fast nor slow pace. In the eyes of those thousands of people at the square, of course, they could not help but feel surprised and confused. Qin Wushuang? Who is this person? It seems that he is only an advanced disciple? How could he be qualified to meet our teacher? And he is with the core disciples? Yes, I have never heard of this Qin Wushuang before. Have any of you seen him before? I have never seen him before. I feel that he has just entered the sect? Just when these people were discussing, one of the disciples suddenly sneered. Don't be unconvinced when I say that you guys are ignorant and inexperienced. Now, this Qin Wushuang has a great reputation. Our teacher went to greet the champion of the martial arts student exam and fought with many palace masters to take him in as a disciple. Fought to take him in as a disciple? Those people were all stunned. How could such a dreamy thing happen? With their teacher's position and strength, how could he have fought to take in a disciple? Was this Qin Wushuang truly that monstrous? From his appearance, he did not seem to have 3 heads and 6 arms. Senior brother Ku, you are well informed. How is this Qin Wushuang so famous? We have been training in the mountain and do not know much about the outside world. Senior brother Ku chuckled and said, "Aren't I cultivating in the mountains? One had to rely on one's ears to hear news, and gossip had to be dug out by oneself. This Qin Wushuang, haha, he comes from the Baiyu country, a subordinate country of the great Luo Empire." Baiyu. What kind of heaven-defying talent can come from that kind of lousy place? Senior brother Ku, did you make a mistake? Believe it or not, it's up to you. Senior brother Ku looked unhappy and impatient. I don't really believe what others say. However, senior brother Ku's connections are something that all of us admire. Please go ahead. Obviously, everyone was very interested in Qin Wushuang, the dark horse. To put it bluntly, they weren't interested in Qin Wushuang himself, but rather, they were interested in how Qin Wushuang was able to gain their master's favor. They really wanted to learn the knowledge behind it. When that senior brother Ku heard these flattering words, his expression softened slightly as he said slowly, "Don't judge people based on their past. Especially that tone from a moment ago. If this senior brother Qin heard it, I am afraid you will not be able to survive in the Green Cloud Palace. I am not afraid to scare you to death with my experiences during this time." Ah, senior brother Ku, just say it. Don't keep us in suspense. I was speechless before, I was speechless. That person sighed with sorrow. Let's not talk about the details. Recently, this Qin Wushuang had killed the 2 martial saints from the Great Wu and the West Chu. With such an achievement, do you guys think you are qualified to do it? Killed the martial saints. Everyone was stunned as they looked at that senior brother Ku dumbfoundedly. They blinked their eyes and found it hard to believe. Your information is too outdated, There was a wave of pride in that senior brother Ku's words, as if he had a great relationship with Qin Wushuang and felt the same about Qin Wushuang's achievements. Senior brother Ku, this Qin Wushuang looks so young. Isn't it a bit abnormal for him to kill the martial saints? Could he have natural spiritual roots? Senior brother Ku said with disdain. So what if he is young? It is not strange for a true genius to show his talent at a young age. Although there are great talents who mature late, not everyone has the hope. This Qin Wushuang is this abnormal. You guys have no choice but to be convinced. Under the attention of 12 pairs of astonished eyes, Qin Wushuang walked into the palace. Disciple Qin Wushuang greets teacher. Qin Wushuang bowed and cupped his hands. Greetings to all senior brothers and sisters. It's you? Zhou Fu's pair of beautiful eyes blinked, and then a joyful expression appeared on her face. You are Qin Wushuang. Qin Wushuang said with a smile. Senior sister Zhou, I am very grateful for the care you have shown me at the gambling competition. Zhou Fu waved her hand. It's not called care, I just don't want the head palace master's line to always win by cheating. Qin Wushuang, you are good. At that time, I was still wondering which line this young disciple came from. I didn't expect that he is my junior brother. Senior sister Zhou, this junior brother Wushuang has participated in the gambling competition before? Zhou Fu was obviously excited as she nodded. That's right, not only did he participate, he even defeated the 9th junior brother from the line of the head palace master and won the championship of the gambling competition. Zhou Fu's tone was filled with joy and pride. It was apparent that this Zhou Fu's personality had inherited from Tan Zhongqi. She had a strong sense of identity and belonging to the Green Cloud Palace. When she saw that an exceptional genius had appeared in her line, instead of feeling jealous, she was very happy. Fu Er introduced to Wushuang. After this year's end-of-the-year exam, you guys will be in the same line. Everyone must love each other and protect the reputation of the Green Cloud Palace, understand? Yes. Zhou Fu smiled wholeheartedly and introduced. Wushuang, this is your second senior brother Lu Ting. Third senior brother Jian Rui. Fourth senior brother Li Tianrun. Qin Wushuang had a good memory. After one introduction, he remembered all the names of the core disciples and could relate them to each other. Tan Zhongqi looked at this scene happily and said, From now on, the 13 of you will be the pillars of the Green Cloud Palace. If I have guessed correctly, the successor of the Green Cloud Palace will come from the 13 of you. As for who will win in the end, I will not be biased. Everything will be based on the individual's strength and achievement. Understand? We understand. Everyone answered seriously. In the Green Cloud Palace, we do not have many rules and regulations. There is only one rule. Between the senior brothers, we must love each other. We must not scheme against each other, nor be jealous of each other. Within the territory of the Stargaze Palace, we must not ruin my reputation. Within the Tianxian land, we must not lose the face of the Stargaze Palace. To outsiders, Tan Zhongqi, the second palace master, was an iron-face figure. He was extremely strict and even somewhat unreasonable. It was hard to get along with him. However, his education to the disciples was strict on the outside, but generous on the inside. He gave the disciples a lot of freedom. Furthermore, he was usually very protective of his disciples and would never let his disciples suffer outside. Even if his disciples made a mistake outside, he would cover for them first. Then, he would punish them when they returned. Thus, he had gained the support of his disciples. These core disciples were all nurtured by him. They admired Tan Zhongqi and obeyed him completely. Of course, there would not be any internal strife. Tan Zhongqi looked at each person's expression and grasped their mentality. Among you guys, you might be confused as to why I would promote Qin Wushuang and put a new disciple on par with you guys. Fu Er said that Wushuang had participated in the gambling competition, but this may not be convincing. I will give you 2 examples. Qi Xingnan, the martial saint of the Great Wu, the second martial saint of the West Chu, and Li Wuji, the head disciple of the old devil Ji Yin. I believe that any one of these 3 would not lose to most of you core disciples. And now these 3 are no longer alive. And the one who killed them is your new junior brother, Qin Wushuang. As soon as he said these words, those core disciples were all moved as they looked at Qin Wushuang with astonishment. Even Zhou Fu had a whole new level of respect for him. Her limpid eyes sized Qin Wushuang from head to toe as she gave a long sigh. As the senior sister, I am somewhat ignorant and inexperienced. The new junior brother is so powerful, and I did not hear anything about it. Junior brother Wushuang, for this year's end-of-the-year exam, you must perform well. You must strive to make everyone in the Stargaze Palace look at you in a new light. Let me and your senior sister feel proud. For sure I will do my best and not bring shame to your name. Apparently, Tan Zhongqi also had high expectations for Qin Wushuang. However, he did not put any pressure on Qin Wushuang as he said, "Of course, Wushuang's most important task is to pass the exam and enter the ranks of the core disciples. Only by entering the ranks of the core disciples will you be qualified to participate in the core ranking competition." Zhou Fu laughed. Passing the exam is as easy as turning one's hand. With junior brother Wushuang's performance at the gambling competition, it will be easy for him to participate in the advanced disciple exam. Although that's the case, you must still be careful to avoid unexpected failure. Wushuang, do you know about the promotion system of the end-of-the-year exam? I heard Emissary Lu mention it. However, I don't know the exact details. Fu you are in charge of explaining it to Wushuang. Zhou Fu nodded and laughed lightly. Junior brother Wushuang, since you are an advanced disciple, you should know that you need to participate in the exam. As long as you rank in the top 3 among the advanced disciples, you will advance directly. If you rank 4th or 5th, you will need to compete with the last 4 or 5 upper sky disciples for a spot. And for the core disciple exam, the last 3 will be demoted to an advanced disciple. Thus, as long as you get one of the top 3 spots, you will be guaranteed to become a core disciple. Qin Wushuang nodded. I understand. Only, what about the content of the exam? I don't know about it yet. Tan Zhongqi laughed. You don't need to ask about it. Your senior sister Zhou also doesn't know. Each year, the content of the exam is different. This is the core secret of the Stargaze Palace. None of the participating disciples will know about it beforehand. Just like the martial arts student exam you participated in before, the content is kept secret. I understand. Teacher, after becoming a core disciple, will I be qualified to participate in the ranking competition? Tan Zhongqi nodded with a smile. The core ranking competition is the highlight of each year. Each faction values it greatly. It is the best test for all the core disciples. As long as you rank in the top 3 of the advanced disciple exam, you will become a new core disciple. Of course, you will be qualified to participate in the ranking competition. Qin Wushuang nodded and a trace of longing flashed across his eyes. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 207. Tan Zhongqi's mobilization meeting was completely different from the other halls. There weren't many bold words, but his words and actions were able to make the disciples die for him. Their blood boiled, and they wanted to risk their lives for the Green Cloud Hall to get a good result. They had won a happy smile from their teacher. Of course, this was related to Tan Zhongqi's usual attitude towards his disciples. It could be said that it was a form of charisma. After all, not everyone in the Stargaze Palace was lucky enough to have such a protective senior. After the Green Cloud Hall had finished gathering, Tan Zhongqi gave instructions to the core disciples and walked out of the hall. He gave some encouragement to the advanced disciples and primary disciples outside and said, "Our Green Cloud Hall has never been a hypocrite. Everyone, do your best. Not to mention the result, everyone will fight for the honor of the Green Cloud Palace. Don't be arrogant if you win, and don't be discouraged if you lose. It's fine as long as everyone does their best. Now, follow me to the main palace. Everyone, stay in order and don't panic." After Tan Zhongqi had finished instructing, He led the disciples of the Green Cloud Palace towards the main palace. After they had gathered at the main palace, the end-of-the-year exam would begin with vigor. The giant and spacious area outside the main palace could hold at least 100,000 people. Currently, the 5 lines of the 5 palace masters and the other disciples under the Shakyamuni and elders all gathered in an orderly manner according to the areas they had divided. Although there were tens of thousands of official disciples in the Stargaze Palace, it did not seem crowded at all in this square. The line of the second palace master held a highly respected position in the Stargaze Palace. Thus, the areas they were divided into were eye-catching. Tan Zhongqi brought the line of the Green Cloud Palace and instructed Zhou Fu and the other core disciples to maintain order. Then, he walked towards the main palace. The other palace masters of the other palaces also hurried over and walked into the main palace. Before the exam started, all the palace masters and the Shakyamuni and elders must meet. As Tan Zhongqi walked towards the main palace, the other palace masters all revealed a playful expression. However, Tan Zhongqi did not care. He knew that these people were more or less scheming in their hearts. In the previous years, the line of the head palace master had taken the lead in the end-of-the-year exam. The other palace masters had no power to shake the position of the head palace master. Usually, Tan Zhongqi, the line of the second palace master, had taken the second place. After all, since he was the second palace master, he must have his own unique side. It was reasonable for the overall strength of his disciples to be slightly ahead. However, because of this slight lead, the other palace masters were not convinced. Each time when it was the end-of-the-year exam, these guys would feel overflowing with ambition. They wanted to drag down the line of the second palace master and replace him to become the second powerhouse in the Stargaze Palace. Tan Zhongqi was no stranger to such thoughts. In the past, I didn't have Qin Wushuang as a surprise weapon, and you guys still couldn't suppress me. This year, don't even think about overshadowing my lineage. Tan Zhongqi had a trace of disdain in his heart. His goal was to aim for 3 spots in the top 10 and strive to be closer to the first palace master's faction on paper, instead of competing with the other palace masters. The 5th palace master, Tian Zhixing, more or less held a grudge because of the West Chu incident. However, the 5th palace master was a humorous person and did not hold a grudge. He only teased, "Second brother, for this year's year-end examination, do you have any ambitions? Let's talk about your ambitions first." Tan Zhongqi did not buy it at all. Zhong Wuyin, the 3rd palace master, had always competed with Tan Zhongqi the most. He was also the one who wanted to suppress Tan Zhongqi's faction the most. After all, he was the closest to Tan Zhongqi. One was the 2nd palace master, and the other was the 3rd palace master. His desire to surpass Tan Zhongqi had never stopped. Hearing Tan Zhongqi's words, Zhong Wuyin, the 3rd palace master, said, "For this year-end exam, for sure, the line of the head palace master will have no suspense. I think they will have at least 5 spots in the top 10. The 4 of us will compete for the other 4. For each palace, 1 spot in the top 10 will be locked. It will depend on which palace can get 2 spots." Tan Zhongqi had already sensed Zhong Wuyin's intentions. However, he did not care about it. "Third, can you be a bit more mature? The ranking competition has not even started, and you are already in a hurry to distribute the spots? This quota was obtained through hard work, not through the eloquence of us old fellows, who said that we can only compete for 5 spots." Zhong Wuyin heard that Tan Zhongqi's tone was full of confidence. Naturally, he was not convinced. He put on a fake smile and said, "Second, from your tone, it seems that you want to challenge the line of the head palace master?" The 4th palace master, Leng Qiuqi, who was known for his cold face, suddenly sneered. "Challenge the head palace master? That is overestimating oneself. Our few factions do not have the strength to compete with the head palace master's faction. Just save it." Tan Zhongqi could naturally hear that these two guys were not convinced of his position as the second palace master. However, he was not angry. He rolled his eyes and simply ignored these two guys. At this moment, the head palace master strode into the main palace with a majestic gait. He greeted with a face full of smiles. "Four brothers, you are early." Head palace master. The four of them stepped forward and cupped their hands. Hee, how time flies. Last year's year-end exam seems to have happened yesterday. Unexpectedly, a year has already passed. Everyone, how's your preparation? Of course, we cannot compare to your faction. Zhong Wuyin said with a smile. This year, my goal is to get 2 spots in the top 10. Zhuo Buchuan, the head palace master, was the head of the Stargaze Palace. Hearing Zhong Wuyin's words, he encouraged him with a smile. 2 spots in the top 10 are worth fighting for. Third, you always complain that you don't have enough disciples. It seems that's not the case. Have you been hiding your strength? Zhong Wuyin revealed a proud expression and pretended to be humble. Although I don't have many disciples, I have always been strict with my disciples. After years of accumulation, I do have a few good cards. Only, whether these cards are good or not, it will depend on the results of this year-end exam. Haha, it will not be bad. Zhuo Buchuan, the head palace master, looked at the others with a smile. How about you guys? Tian Zhixing, the 5th palace master, said with a depressed tone. I have no suspense. I will keep 1 spot in the top 10. I don't ask for merit, but to not make any mistakes. After all, in my faction, it will never be my turn to have a good seedling. There was a saying that the crying child would get the milk. Apparently, this 5th palace master understood this saying. In a few words, he started to complain about his difficulties. However, Leng Qiuqi, the 4th palace master, said, For my faction, I can only do my best. The head palace master, the Shakyamuni and the elders are all here. After everyone has signed the fair competition agreement, let's enter the main topic. In fact, Tan Zhongqi was not willing to speak nonsense. It was rare for him to support the viewpoint of the 4th palace master, as he also nodded. Yes, 1,000 words of nonsense would not be as good as an actual performance in the exam. Head palace master, let's go through the procedure. Zhuo Buchuan nodded with a smile. It seems that everyone is impatient. Alright, everyone, this is the fair competition agreement. Let's follow the old rules. Come up according to your ranking and sign your name. If any faction cheats, all of their grades will be cancelled. No one is allowed to have any special treatment. This agreement must be signed every year during the exam. To create an absolutely fair competition environment, the punishment for cheating would be severe. All the grades would be cancelled. Thus, for such exam, it was impossible to cheat and it was impossible to do so. The head palace master signed his name first. Then, Tan Zhongqi went up and signed his name. All the higher-ups in the Stargaze Palace had signed their names. Finally, the head palace master spoke. Everyone, the signing is done and it will take effect immediately. All higher-ups at the palace master level, please come out with me and announce the exam content. The 5 palace masters walked out of the great hall together and stood on the high step. Looking down, all eyes were focused on the scene above. Apparently, they were looking forward to the arrival of the exam. The head palace master smiled lightly and opened a sealed scroll. All disciples of the Stargaze Palace, the annual exam is about to begin. As usual, the disciples of the Stargaze Palace will be divided into 3 levels. The exam content will also be divided into 3 levels. The promotion and demotion system will be the same as the previous years. Between the core and advanced disciples, there will be 3 to 5 changes. Between the advanced and initial disciples, there will be 30 to 50 changes. Everyone will have a chance. Those who are interested in upgrading, bring out all your energy. His words caused the blood of the Stargaze Palace disciples to surge and boil. Each of them rubbed their fists and prepared for a big fight. The exam content for each level is different and the difficulty is also different. However, the exam content for each level is divided into 6 sections. The exam content for the advanced disciples is. Qin Wushuang pricked up his ears to listen. The exam content for the initial disciples had nothing to do with him. Of course, he would not care. He only cared about the exam content for the advanced disciples. After he had finished announcing the exam content for the initial disciples, the head palace master paused for a moment and said in a clear voice, "Next is the exam content for the advanced disciples. There are also 6 sections. Weapons, body movements, strength, endurance, martial arts level, and overall ability. For weapons, of course, it will test your proficiency in using weapons, destructive power, and actual combat power. For body movements, it will test your agility, speed, and reaction. At that time, the examiner will announce the details for you. And the strength exam is the most simple. It will test your ability to carry weight, individual attack power, and other content. Endurance is the test that tests a person the most. Everyone who participated in the test would enter a spiritual energy array, and the array would constantly produce pressure. The longer you stay inside, the better your grade will be. The martial arts level is also straightforward. It will test your specific martial arts level. The overall ability exam is the most complicated. For this section, your examiner will announce the rules. The head palace master explained one by one and announced, "All advanced disciples, gather at the north side of the big square. There will be 600 of you. Each of you will have your own number. Now go and get your number." All the advanced disciples rushed to the north side of the square. P.S. The year-end exam is about to begin. Brothers, please hurry and get your monthly vote. Today's monthly votes are rather tragic. And the people behind us are catching up. This makes Old Bull feel somewhat uneasy. Haha. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com, support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 208. Just when Qin Wushuang was about to step forward, Zhou Fu walked up from behind and encouraged him. "Junior brother Wushuang, good luck. We will wait for you in the core group." Qin Wushuang looked at Zhou Fu's clear eyes that did not carry the slightest trace of hypocrisy. Instead, it was sincere and came from the bottom of her heart. He also felt touched as he nodded solemnly. "Okay, a gentleman's promise, see you there." Zhou Fu smiled sweetly. "Although I am a girl, I am not a gentleman. However, I believe in you that you will break through easily." Qin Wushuang nodded and walked towards the north of the square. Among all the disciples in the Stargaze Palace, although the advanced disciples were only in the 2nd tier, they were still the elite of the Stargaze Palace. After all, there were about 10,000 disciples in the Stargaze Palace. Besides the 96 core disciples, there were only 600 advanced disciples. The rest were only initial stage disciples. In fact, the advanced disciples were also good seedlings selected from different places. Only, they did not have the chance to become core disciples. However, a portion of them were already in the upper sky realm. Only, a portion of them did not reach the upper sky realm on their own. Instead, they relied on the upper sky initial stage pills to help them break through. Thus, they had already lost the opportunity to become a core disciple. However, it did not mean that they did not want to compete. According to the rules, if they could get into the top 3, they would not have the title of a core disciple. However, they would be authorized to enter the Virtuous Cloud Summit to train. Without the title, they could enjoy some of the benefits of a core disciple. It was also a very attractive temptation. Of course, basically, the top 3 in the past exam had reached the upper sky realm on their own. Historically, there had been pre-sky realm warriors who had successfully gotten into the top 3 and advanced directly. To such unusual people, the Stargaze Palace would make an exception and give them the supreme quality upper sky initial stage pills. It would help them break into the upper sky realm and stabilize their position as a core disciple. After Qin Wushuang had heard the content of the exam, inwardly, he was already calculating. He was confident that this level of exam would not be too difficult for him. However, considering the fact that there were some upper sky realm warriors among the advanced disciples, he did not dare to let down his guard. After all, the top 3 spots were limited and they would need to rely on the total score. Thus, Qin Wushuang decided to exert all his efforts and unleash all of his power. He would aim to break through with a perfect score. This way, he would not have to worry about falling outside of the top 3 spots and being squeezed out by the other upper sky disciples. Senior brother Qin. A voice suddenly called out from behind him. Qin Wushuang turned around and saw that it was Yanfeng, whom he had met in the Wanxiang Valley. Qin Wushuang was overjoyed. "It's you? Are you also participating in the advanced disciple assessment?" Yanfeng forced a smile and said, "I'm only in the 9th level of the true martial realm, a Hotian realm martial artist." It was said that there were 20 to 30 innate rankers among the senior disciples. "There's no way I'll be in the top 3. I'm just going to participate in the routine business. I just hope that my ranking won't be lower than last year." His mouth moved again, as if he wanted to ask something, but in the end, he didn't. Qin Wushuang knew what he was thinking. He said in a low voice, "We've already gotten what we want. Don't worry. After the test, I will look for you. If I give it to you now, there will be too many eyes and ears around." A trace of ecstasy flashed across Yanfeng's eyes before he calmed down and nodded his head in agreement. "Attention, everyone. Come up one by one to receive your number plate." Each of the 600 senior disciples had a number plate. Qin Wushuang's number plate was exactly 100, and Yanfeng's number was 231. Qin Wushuang looked at the fanatical senior disciples and sighed in his heart. This test seems simple, but the rules are actually very cruel. Out of the 600 people, only 5 will be chosen, and only 3 will be directly promoted. The other 2 will still have to compete. With this probability, most of the people are destined to be escorts. But look at these people, they are so fanatical. There aren't many who are as calm and clear as Yanfeng. It's enough to see how fanatical the atmosphere of this test is. Every 10 people will be ranked according to their number and follow the leader to the test field. The first test is a weapon test. The full score is 100. When the top 10 people heard this announcement, they immediately followed the leader with fanaticism. The duration of the test was obviously not long. About half an hour later, this group of people returned. Looking at their expressions, they were obviously somewhat depressed. Obviously, the results of the first test didn't satisfy most of them. A few of them were even dejected. It was obvious that they had suffered a heavy blow. After a while, it was Qin Wushuang's turn. Qin Wushuang smiled lightly and said to Yanfeng, "I will go first." He followed that leader and walked towards the test field. The people in charge of the test were all deacons of the Stargaze Palace. Each of them was an upper sky realm warrior with similar strength. One of the head deacons said with an indifferent tone, "These 10 deacons are your examiners. You will use weapons to spar with them. They will test your proficiency in using the weapons, as well as your attacking and destructive power. Please match your examiners according to the end of your number. Do you see the mud dolls behind the examiners? If your attack power can break one mud doll under the defense of the examiners, you will get 10 points. A total of 10, a total of 100 points. Time is limited, please cherish each second." Inwardly, Qin Wushuang felt apprehensive. It was no wonder that most of the disciples in the previous test were dejected. Under the defense of the upper sky deacons, it would not be an easy task to break their defense and destroy the mud dolls behind them. Especially for the pre-sky realm warriors, it would be extremely difficult. Don't worry about personal gains and losses. These examiners will suppress their power. They will not unleash their full power. If they unleash their full power, you don't need to participate in the test. No one will get a single point. Qin Wushuang moved the corner of his mouth and revealed a playful smile. Inwardly, he thought that his words were too absolute. No one would get a single point? At least, Qin Wushuang would not believe this. He twitched the corner of his mouth and said to that examiner with the last number 0, "Mr. Examiner, I am going to make my move." When that examiner saw Qin Wushuang's strange smile from the corner of his mouth, he had already paid attention to it. Inwardly, he thought that this advanced disciple seemed to be unconvinced. He wanted to see if he had the skills. "Let's start. Remember, you only have 100 breaths of time," Qin Wushuang said leisurely with the snake-shaped soft whip in his hand. 100 breaths of time is enough. Inwardly he thought, I only need 20 breaths of time. As his voice fell, the long whip had already shot out from his sleeve. It danced in the air and attacked that examiner. Qin Wushuang did not suppress his strength at all. With the help of his Xiantian aura, the long whip immediately coiled around like a snake. It spat out strange arcs and attacked the examiner until he could not grasp the angle. Good guy. Inwardly, that butler praised Qin Wushuang and flicked his sleeves. Suddenly, like a pair of steel umbrellas, his sleeves opened with a whoosh and formed a layer of protective qi. It pushed away Qin Wushuang's snake-shaped soft whip. Qin Wushuang laughed. Good defense. He had to admit that this examiner's methods were indeed not ordinary. He had indeed suppressed his strength. However, how could Qin Wushuang be compared to an ordinary advanced disciple? He had no intention of tangling with the examiner. He suddenly lifted his foot and twisted his body like a slippery fish. The snake-shaped soft whip suddenly made a turn and directly coiled around the examiner's waist. That examiner's waist seemed to have been smeared with oil. He took advantage of the momentum and rolled away from Qin Wushuang's attack. He shouted, 10 breaths of time. Qin Wushuang sneered. So what? The long whip quickly approached and swept across the examiner's legs again. Hee hee, you want to hurt me? It won't be that easy. The examiner's legs seemed to be installed with springs. He suddenly jumped up and dodged Qin Wushuang's whip again. Qin Wushuang laughed. He suddenly raised his left hand and a red light shot out. At the same time, the snake-shaped soft whip was swung upwards to prevent the examiner from falling. In this way, the Xiantian spiritual power of the long whip was able to stop the examiner from falling. He did not dare to easily land on the ground. At this time, the red light was like a raging flood dragon. It had already broken through the examiner's defensive range. As if it was a creature endowed with spiritual power, it loudly slashed down on the 10 clay puppets. Shwa! Sword chi swept across and cut down a row. The 10 mud dolls were neatly cut into 2 at the same time. Qin Wushuang's left hand made a grabbing motion and the purple sun sword flew back to his back. Qin Wushuang withdrew the long whip and leisurely retreated. He crossed his arms and smiled. 20 breaths of time. How about that? The examiner laughed. Cut in half but not broken. It doesn't count. Qin Wushuang was still smiling. Then take a look again. The deacon curiously turned his head to look. The 10 clay dolls seemed to have come to an agreement. Suddenly, with a crash, they shattered and turned into dust. The examiner laughed and gave a thumbs up. Not bad, young man. With your skills, how could you only be an advanced disciple? I joined too late. I can only follow the rules. The examiner suddenly understood. So that's how it is. What is your name? Qin Wushuang. You are Qin Wushuang? The examiner was dumbfounded. Then he laughed involuntarily. So that's how it is. You are Qin Wushuang. No wonder. Haha, I heard that when you first joined, the second palace master personally applied for a core disciple position for you. It must be you, right? Not bad, not bad. Using actions to speak is 10 times better than using the back door. That's because my master loves me. Qin Wushuang saw that the examiner was polite and did not act arrogant. He asked, "Examiner, may I know if this time's results will be counted?" The examiner laughed. Of course. Full marks, no doubt. With your skills, even if I did my best to block you, I'm afraid you would still get full marks. It's just that it might take a bit more time." Qin Wushuang cupped his hands. "I don't dare. I'll take my leave first." His side of the examination had ended. The other 9 people in the same group were still struggling. 100 breaths of time was not a lot, but it was not a little either. But at present, apart from Qin Wushuang, very few of the other 9 people could destroy the mud dolls. Only 2 of them had destroyed 1 or 2 mud dolls. "Senior brother Qin, why did you come back early?" Yan Feng was very puzzled. Among the disciples of the second palace master, some advanced disciples also recognized Qin Wushuang. Among them, it included that boastful senior brother Ku, who also walked up with a face full of smiles. "Senior brother Qin, congratulations. You should have passed with full marks, right? The talents from our Green Cloud Hall are indeed different." Others came back with a sad face, but you came back early with ease. "Alright, let me introduce myself. My surname is Ku, and I am also a disciple under the second palace master." Hearing this, the senior disciples who had returned earlier all turned to look at him. Their eyebrows were clearly filled with suspicion. It was impossible for anyone to come back early with such a perverted examination content. It was very likely that this kid had been sent back in advance. At this moment, the other 9 senior disciples in the same group as Qin Wushuang also came back. They all looked around, obviously looking for Qin Wushuang. One of them shouted exaggeratedly, "Too perverted, he's not human." In less than 20 breaths of time, he destroyed 10 mud dolls. Full marks. The first one to get full marks appeared in our group. "Haha, I saw it with my own eyes." As soon as this remark came out, the whole place was in an uproar. The senior disciples who had failed in the previous groups looked at Qin Wushuang with eyes full of admiration. This chapter is written with a few hundred more words to repay the support of the readers in the galaxy. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 209. No one knew if it was Qin Wushuang's brilliant performance that stimulated the latecomers. The advanced disciples who continued to participate in the assessment finally had good result. However, no one could be like Qin Wushuang and completely destroy 10 mud dolls within 20 breaths. Therefore, after the first round of assessment, Qin Wushuang's results were already in the lead. After this round, almost half of the advanced disciples didn't even get 10 points. Because under the defense of the attendants, they didn't have any hope of getting close to the mud dolls. Yan Feng also used the throwing knife skill to destroy 3 mud dolls at the last moment and got 30 points. This score was already considered the highest among all the advanced disciples. Without a doubt, after the first round of assessment, the ones in the lead were those Xiantian group. The first round of assessment took a full 4 hours. After a short rest, the second round of assessment began. The second round of assessment was to test one's body movement. The examiner stood in the front row and said loudly, "The speed assessment is not complicated. There is an assessment station 50 miles to the west from here. You will depart from here and go to the assessment station to get a jade plate corresponding to your number. In this body movement assessment, the first test is absolute speed. In the middle, there will be an assessment of agility and reaction. In other words, in your path, there may be traps, ambushes, hidden weapons, and interference of this and that. You have to react as soon as possible. Every time you get hit, 10 points will be deducted. If you don't get hit at all and can return to this place in the specified time, you will be given a corresponding score according to the time spent. The total score is also 100 points. The examiner glanced sideways and shouted, "Do you all understand?" Understood. This rule wasn't complicated to decipher. Qin Wushuang thought for a while and knew the core of the assessment. The faster the speed, the shorter the time taken to complete the mission, and naturally the higher the score. But speed alone wasn't enough, because there were many obstacles along the way. Once blocked by an obstacle, 10 points would be deducted. This had a higher requirement for agility and reaction. To put it bluntly, these were all within the scope of the body movement assessment. Qin Wushuang was brimming with confidence. He was very confident that a test of this level would not pose a problem for him. Although he was not blindly arrogant, there was no doubt that he was aiming for full marks. In this round of assessment, there were 100 people in a batch, and each batch was separated by half an hour. There were 6 batches in total. Qin Wushuang was assigned to the first group. As soon as they set off, he launched his movement technique, flying at high speed, intending to shake off the rest of the group at the beginning and take the lead. However, his thoughts could not be hidden from the other innate experts in his group. These innate rankers all had the same plan. Of the 5 to 6 people, no one wanted to let the other have the upper hand. They all planned to suppress the other competitors with their imposing manner. This way, including Qin Wushuang, the 5 upper sky spiritual martial force warriors had left their companions in the dust and left them in the dust. As Qin Wushuang sped along, he observed his opponent. He noticed that among these innate rankers, there was one whose spiritual energy was very stable and long. He seemed to be a strong opponent. For the others, although they were not slow in the beginning, it would not be realistic for them to maintain such a high speed for 50 miles. Besides, they had traveled 50 miles when they left and 50 miles when they returned. This round trip was 100 miles. To an upper sky, 100 miles was nothing. However, to maintain the upper sky spiritual chi at full speed was not a small challenge. Besides, there were many unexpected obstacles along the way. After a moment of observation, Qin Wushuang focused all of his attention on the task. While running, he focused all of his attention and maintained a high level of alertness to feel the slightest change in his surroundings. Currently, Qin Wushuang had fully opened his upper sky spiritual perception. His grasp of the environment had reached a state of perfection. He could predict any trace of change. Suddenly, Qin Wushuang's spiritual perception moved in his mind and his feet moved. While running the immortal virtuous cloud steps at a high speed, he did not panic. Suddenly, he twisted his body and flashed twice to the right. Only 2 chi-chi sounds of breaking the air could be heard. Qin Wushuang did not slow down as he continued to dash forward with a cold sneer. He had easily dodged the first sneak attack from the hidden weapon. Next, Qin Wushuang used his spiritual chi to predict. In the blink of an eye, he made 3 predictions. In a flash, he would reach the destination of the 50 miles. Suddenly, Qin Wushuang swung his long whip and attacked between the 2 big trees in front of him. With a crashing sound, a giant net covered him from above. Suddenly, Qin Wushuang's footsteps seemed to have a break. He stepped on the ground and stopped right behind the net. His body rolled in the air like a swallow gliding through the water. He easily passed through this obstacle and ran towards the destination at a fast speed. In the blink of an eye, he arrived at the assessment station in front of him. With the numbered plate in his hand, Qin Wushuang finally turned around leisurely. The return journey was not easy. As soon as he had walked 1 or 2 miles, that upper sky warrior who had followed him the closest also sprinted quickly. When he saw that Qin Wushuang was already on his way back, a trace of strange light flashed across his eyes as he was full of admiration. On the way back, Qin Wushuang passed by groups of people along the way. When they saw Qin Wushuang returning, they could not help but take a few more glances. But other than a gust of wind-like figure, they could not see anything else. They only saw a blur in front of their eyes. When they looked again, they could only see a distant figure. Who is this person? How can he be so abnormal? Could it be that guy called Qin Wushuang again? Along the way, there were many people who thought this. After all, Qin Wushuang's performance in the first round had given everyone a psychological shock. It made them feel that fate was unfair. Why did such a big abnormal person appear in this year's Advanced Disciple Assessment? It made the Advanced Disciple Assessment look like there was no suspense at all. That Qin Wushuang obviously has the strength of a core disciple, but he came to participate in the Advanced Disciple Assessment. It's really depressing. The people who had this thought were not only the Hotian masters, but also some of the Xiantian advanced disciples could not help but sigh. When Qin Wushuang returned to the assessment station, the examiner could not help but give him a thumbs up. Good boy, your speed is simply like going out for a spin. Without a doubt, Qin Wushuang got another full score. With the experience of the previous 2 rounds, Qin Wushuang gradually understood the difficulty of the Advanced Disciple Assessment. For ordinary advanced disciples, the difficulty might be relatively high. But at his level, the content of the Advanced Disciple Assessment did not pose much of a threat to him. Unless he took the initiative to make a mistake, otherwise, it would be difficult for him to not enter the top 3. After the 2 rounds, Qin Wushuang did not lose any point. This result had already allowed him to lead far in the rankings. And after this round, the other Upper Sky Realm warriors had more or less lost some point. It also allowed Qin Wushuang to consolidate his leading position. The 3rd round of assessment was a test of strength. To Qin Wushuang, he was not unfamiliar with this part. Initially, he had encountered it during the martial arts student exam in River County. Only this time, besides the weight-bearing test, there was also a test of individual attack power. In fact, the individual attack power was still a competition of strength. For someone like Qin Wushuang, an Upper Sky Realm warrior who was skilled in using the natural power, his individual attack power was astonishing. Of course, there was not much suspense in this round of assessment. It could only stabilize Qin Wushuang's lead. Without any suspense, Qin Wushuang got another full score. After 3 rounds, he had gotten 3 full scores and a total of 300 points. He was far ahead of the second place, who had 240 points. After these 3 rounds of assessment, it was already dusk. The first day of assessment had ended. There were only 3 days for the year-end assessment. The most important part was still the core ranking competition. This was the most important part of each year. An assessment like this was only a test. Everyone knew that there would not be much suspense in this assessment. However, it was completely different for the core ranking competition. Some core disciples had even saved some of their strength during the assessment. They were waiting to unleash their full power during the core ranking competition. Compared to Qin Wushuang's lead among the advanced disciples, the core assessment was calm and did not have much suspense. Basically, everyone was maintaining the same situation as last year. Apparently, those who had the strength had not used their full power. Because there was no big news in the core assessment, Qin Wushuang's outstanding performance had attracted a lot of attention. After the end of the first day of assessment, everyone was talking about it. Did you hear? In the Advanced Disciple Assessment, a monstrous person had appeared. He did not lose a single point in all 3 assessments. This has not happened for a dozen years, right? Yes, it's monstrous. If I remember correctly, the last time such a grand event happened was 16 years ago. Wei Yi, the senior brother of the head palace master, had such a monstrous performance. However, that senior brother Wei Yi has the natural spiritual roots. He is the only one in the Stargaze Palace. Could it be that this Qin Wushuang also has the natural spiritual roots? I don't think so. I heard that he came from the subordinate countries. Those subordinate countries would not have nurtured the natural spiritual root. This Qin Wushuang should be a genius in the pre-sky realm. Tisk tsk, they are both pre-sky realm. How come there is such a big difference? I just don't know if this Qin Wushuang could reach senior brother Wei Yi's achievement in the future. I really hope that such a situation would happen. With 2 shining stars, the future of the Stargaze Palace would be even more wonderful. The sound of discussion filled the entire Stargaze Palace with envy. And at the line of the second palace master, Tan Zhongqi was listening attentively to his disciples reporting the results. When he heard Qin Wushuang's words, Tan Zhongqi could not help but laugh. One must say that Tan Zhongqi's laughter was filled with joy from the bottom of his heart. It carried a form of high-spirited pride. P.S. Today, it's still 12,000 words. Continue to fight for the monthly votes. Also, I recommend this Xianxia book. The name of the book: Blue Sky Immortal Mansion, book number 1669081. The story is first class, easy and funny. The background is also big enough and the writing style is excellent. Students who like this type should take a look. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 210. Instantly, Tan Zhongqi's hearty laughter influenced the others. Besides Qin Wushuang, the other 12 core disciples were greatly encouraged. They had followed Tan Zhongqi for many years and knew his personality. If he was not in a good mood, he would never laugh so happily. 300 points, good job. Wushuang, I am very glad that I put down my pride and fought for you with the 3rd and 5th palace masters. Haha, I believe that during this time, 3rd and 5th must be regretting their decision. Recently, 3rd and I are not on good terms. It seems that he is still brooding over this matter. Ha! Tan Zhongqi kept laughing. You 12 core disciples, your exam results have improved steadily. You just need to keep it up. This kind of exam is not too difficult for you guys. It's good that you have held back. As long as you don't fail miserably, you can decide how to use your strength. I will not nag you. However, when the core ranking competition starts, you must be 120% focused. When Tan Zhongqi said this, he twitched his mouth and laughed strangely. Let me tell you guys something. This year's core ranking competition is different from the previous years. Not only will there be special rewards, there will also be special opportunities. The higher the ranking, the better the treatment, especially the top 10. This time, I hope that we can break through 3 of the top 10 spots and change history. In history, other than the head palace master's disciples, none of the disciples had taken 3 spots in the top 10. At most, there were only 2. This history needed someone to break it. Tan Zhongqi really hoped that he would be the one to break this history and create a new one. This was his current ambition. Wushuang. Tan Zhongqi suddenly called out. Yes. Qin Wushuang took a step forward. I will set a target for you. Do you dare to challenge it? Tan Zhongqi said with a smile. Please speak. Qin Wushuang did not hesitate. Okay, in the history of the Advanced Disciple exam, there were about 10 people who scored full mark. The most recent one was 16 years ago. At that time, it was set by Wei Yi of the head palace master's disciples. This record has been frozen for 16 years. Right now, my hope for you is to try and break this record. Do you have the confidence to reappear the record from 16 years ago? Tan Zhongqi's gaze suddenly became incomparably solemn. He looked at Qin Wushuang expectantly. Qin Wushuang said sternly, Disciple will do his best and not disappoint Shizhuan. All right. Tan Zhongqi chuckled and said, If you can accomplish this, it will be another record. In history, the advanced disciples who had obtained full marks had always been from the head palace master's faction. If you can enter the ranks of full marks, then our Green Cloud Hall will also create a new record. Hearing his teacher's words, Qin Wushuang remembered how his teacher had taken care of him and treated him generously. Inwardly, he also made up his mind that he must get this perfect score and make his teacher look better. The other core disciples also went up to encourage him. Junior brother Wushuang, as your senior brothers, we will congratulate you in advance for breaking the record and bringing glory to the Green Cloud Hall. Zhou Fu also laughed. I firmly believe that junior brother Wushuang will enter the ranks of full marks. His future will definitely not lose to senior brother Wei Yi's. Tan Zhongqi chuckled. Fu don't give Wushuang too much pressure. On the path of training, everyone should let nature take its course. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Only by having a firm goal, moving forward without any distractions, and not worrying about gains and losses, can you climb to a higher peak. An appropriate amount of pressure can become motivation. Too much pressure will become a hindrance to training. Thank you for your advice. The group of disciples all nodded. Okay, you can all go now. We will continue tomorrow. This time, the Green Cloud Hall will create some surprises for the Stargaze Palace, haha. Tan Zhongqi appeared to be full of ambition. Suddenly, Zhou Fu pouted her little mouth and asked with a smile. Teacher, you said a moment ago that this core ranking competition has special rewards. What's the difference from the previous years? Tan Zhongqi laughed. You guys don't need to ask. The 5 palace masters have already agreed. Before the end of the ranking competition, it will not be revealed. It's good that you guys know about this. As for the specific rewards, we will know when the time comes. Yes. Helpless, Zhou Fu could only suppress her curiosity. After bidding farewell to Tan Zhongqi, the group of core disciples returned to their rooms. Just as Qin Wushuang was about to leave, suddenly, Zhou Fu caught up from behind and said with a sweet smile, Junior brother Wushuang, would you like to talk with me? Qin Wushuang gave a friendly smile and had a good impression of this senior sister. He nodded. Please. Then follow me. Zhou Fu did not hesitate and flew out of the palace lightly. Qin Wushuang did not dare to neglect and followed behind her. In a moment, the two of them had arrived near the gloomy old plum forest behind the Green Cloud Palace. This plum forest had always been a great scenery of the Green Cloud Palace. Usually, when the disciples had nothing to do, they would come here to take a walk. Now it was the 12th lunar month and the best time to walk in the snow and see the plum blossoms. Under the dim light of the night, Qin Wushuang looked at the beautiful scenery of this plum forest. Each branch seemed to be a piece of white jade. They were crystal clear and as warm as jade. Emitting a rich fragrance, they could not help but feel relaxed and happy when they entered his nose. Such a beautiful scenery! Qin Wushuang praised inwardly and looked at the beautiful scenery. Suddenly, he remembered the high school he had studied at in his previous life. There used to be a field of cherry blossoms. It was also a beautiful scenery in the midst of chaos. Although the blooming season was different, it still attracted people's imagination and made people intoxicated. Ever since Qin Wushuang had come to this world, he had never felt loss. He had always buried the vicissitudes of life and the regret he had for his sister in his previous life deep inside his heart. Now, when he suddenly saw this scene, he suddenly felt emotional. He remembered his sister's smile and voice from his previous life and could not help but feel pain. However, in the end, he was a sensible person. He restrained this painful emotion in a flash. After a moment, he felt refreshed and restored his previous calm state of mind. Junior brother Wushuang, what do you think of the scenery here? Zhou Fu asked with a smile. It's a different world that makes people intoxicated. Qin Wushuang sighed with emotion. I heard that this plum forest has a few hundred years of history. It has never withered or aged because it has received the spiritual qi from the Stargaze Palace and absorbed the essence of the heaven and earth. It has already become a unique scenery in the Green Cloud Palace. Only it is located in such a remote place. Not many people from the outer palace know about this place. Qin Wushuang said with a smile. Initially, the plum blossom is a proud and aloof flower. It has no intention of fighting for the spring and makes all the other flowers jealous. Or else, why would it choose to bloom in the cold winter and not compete with the spring flowers? I feel that the senior who planted this plum forest must be an elegant person. Zhou Fu did not speak a word. After a moment, suddenly, she gave a long sigh. I heard that the person who planted this plum forest was the previous palace master of the Green Cloud Palace. When she said here, Zhou Fu seemed to have felt something as she mumbled. Has no intention of fighting for the spring and makes all the other flowers jealous. Junior brother Wushuang, did you say these elegant words from your own feelings? When Qin Wushuang heard her question, he could not help but laugh. He had forgotten that they were in another world. Naturally, his elegant words sounded abrupt in Zhou Fu's ears. He would not dare to steal her beauty, especially in front of this senior sister. He felt it was beneath him to lie as he immediately shook his head and said, "It was created by a predecessor. I only read about it by chance." Zhou Fu smiled lightly. I didn't expect that junior brother Wushuang is proficient in both the pen and the sword. You are the odd one out in the Stargaze Palace. I am not proficient in either the pen or the sword. How could I dare to call myself proficient in both? Senior sister, please don't flatter me, Qin Wushuang said humbly. Zhou Fu laughed lightly again and suddenly asked, Junior brother Wushuang, do you know what I want to talk to you about today? Qin Wushuang said respectfully, Please tell me. Zhou Fu's smile was as beautiful as the blooming plum tree. Junior brother Wushuang, you must not act so distant before me. Initially during the gambling competition, you acted recklessly and did not fear the threat from the line of the head palace master. How could you act so distant before me? Our teacher's line is as close as brothers. As time passes, you will feel it. Today, I have asked you to come here to tell you something. Senior sister, please speak. Qin Wushuang smiled helplessly. Yes, today our teacher is very happy. As the head disciple, I have followed him for a dozen years. This is the first time I have seen him laugh so happily. Junior brother Wushuang, just this point alone, you have surpassed us 12 core disciples. Zhou Fu gave a light sigh. I can also see that our teacher has entrusted a lot of things to you. Inwardly, our teacher is lonely and even arrogant. He has a lot of ambitions, but he rarely places them on us, his disciples. However, for us disciples, for all these years, we have been racking our brains to share our teacher's burdens. Unfortunately, we are unable to do more for Master. From Zhou Fu's tone, there was a trace of sadness and regret. Senior sister, there is still a long way to go to share our teacher's burdens. We are still young. Qin Wushuang could not help but advise when he heard Zhou Fu's somewhat sad tone. Zhou Fu shook her head. Young? Junior brother Wushuang, it seems that the 12 core disciples are not that old. However, this is because the Upper Sky Realm warriors have techniques to maintain their youthful appearance. The oldest among us is already over 50 years old. Besides you, I am the youngest one, but I am still much older than you. How old are you? Qin Wushuang blinked his eyes and asked with a smile. Zhou Fu knew that Qin Wushuang wanted to make her happy. She smiled and said, When I entered the sect, I was 12 years old. After this year, it will be the 14th year since I entered the sect. How old do you think I am now? 25? Qin Wushuang blurted out and sighed. Just by looking at your appearance, people would only think that I am your senior brother. They would never think that you are my senior sister. He did not expect senior sister Zhou Fu to be so young. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com to read more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 211. In this lifetime, Qin Wushuang would only be 18 years old after the new year. However, he had gone through a lot of hardships. From his appearance, he had a temperament that a teenager would not have. Thus, he looked more mature. Zhou Fu was not modest as she smiled. That's because you have a maturity and temperament that does not match your age. Entering the upper sky realm at 17 years old, junior brother Wushuang, you are 2 years earlier than me. Senior sister, earlier you said you wanted to talk to me about something, what is it? Qin Wushuang immediately asked when he saw the topic had gone off track. Yes, it's off track. Junior brother Wushuang, in fact, what I want to say is not complicated. I just want to tell you that you don't have to feel any pressure in the Green Cloud Palace. You don't have to worry about what your senior sister or other senior brothers and junior brothers think. Just do whatever you can and don't worry about overshadowing the other disciples. Between the disciples of the Green Cloud Palace, we only help each other and promote each other. There will never be any jealousy. Zhou Fu said seriously, although I am the senior sister, I am still a girl. As the senior sister, I have always been in fear and trepidation, afraid that I would disappoint my teacher. Now I have you, junior brother Wushuang, that's good. The world hopes that one day you will grow up to be a hero like senior brother Wei Yi. You will carry the Green Cloud Palace forward. I will never be jealous. On the contrary, I will support you with all my strength and help you. Zhou Fu spoke with sincerity, and her beautiful eyes were full of hope and sincerity. Her curved eyebrows frowned slightly as she looked at Qin Wushuang. Apparently, she wanted to know what Qin Wushuang thought of her words. Qin Wushuang thought for a moment and sighed lightly. He said seriously, "Senior sister, as a disciple of the Green Cloud Palace, of course I will share my teacher's burden and contribute to the Green Cloud Palace. In the future, if you want me, Qin Wushuang, to contribute, I will not hesitate. Only, I am undisciplined and leading the Green Cloud Palace forward is not my strong suit. I will inevitably disappoint my teacher and senior sister." Zhou Fu shook her head. No one is born to be a leader. Emperors, kings, generals, and ministers had also walked from inexperience to maturity and climbed to the peak. Junior brother Wushuang, you have a calm personality and a meticulous mind. When you do things, you plan before you act. You know when to advance and when to retreat. If you're not suitable, then none of the 12 of us are. It was not that Zhou Fu was forcing him. It was just that ever since she entered the sect, she understood Master Tan Zhongqi's thoughts the best. As a girl, she was the best at observing these minute things. She knew that her master had always felt regretful over the lack of a successor. In the entire Green Cloud Palace, the one with the highest potential and talent was actually her, Zhou Fu. On the path of martial arts training, especially at a major sect like the Stargaze Palace, there were many inconveniences for a female. It would not be difficult to become an elite warrior. However, when it came to leading a palace, sometimes a female would not have the ability to do so. After learning that Qin Wushuang had entered the sect, Zhou Fu was the happiest among all the disciples. Instantly, she felt that the pressure on her shoulders had lessened. She also sincerely hoped that Qin Wushuang could become the successor that her teacher had focused on nurturing and that one day, he could compete with Wei Yi. With the impression from the previous challenge on the arena, plus Qin Wushuang's recent achievements in the subordinate countries, especially after today's advanced disciple exam, Zhou Fu became even more determined. Thus, she decided to open her heart and talk to Qin Wushuang about this problem. She wanted to help him get rid of his worries. Only after all, they had just become fellow disciples. She did not know much about Qin Wushuang's personality. Qin Wushuang did things according to his nature and only asked his heart. If he wanted to show himself, he would not care whether or not he could suppress others' limelight. Qin Wushuang only asked himself and listened to his heart. Or else, he would not have been so stubborn during the battle on the arena. Under the threat of the head palace master, he still did what he wanted. Seeing Zhou Fu's sincerity and eagerness in her eyes, Qin Wushuang felt touched. He said, "Senior sister, I cannot give you any promises right now. When I entered the sect, I told my teacher that on the path of training, I like to be free and unrestrained. I will not walk with a heavy burden on my shoulders, But, since the Green Cloud Palace is my sect, a teacher for a day, a father for life, I am also responsible for the matters of the Green Cloud Palace. As for the future, I will not predict it too early. There are only 4 words. Let nature take its course. Let nature take its course, this was Qin Wushuang's motto. It was the way of nature. Zhou Fu lightly bit her lips and thought. Suddenly, she understood something. She sighed and nodded. I understand. Junior brother Wushuang, I am still at a disadvantage. Teacher knows you better. Tan Zhongqi did not restrict Qin Wushuang at all, and did not give him any pressure. Although Tan Zhongqi had been worrying about the expectations of his successor and the future of the Green Cloud Palace, he had never mentioned it to Qin Wushuang. Tan Zhongqi knew that everything was under a subtle influence. The relationship between Qin Wushuang and the Green Cloud Palace was not something that he could nurture by putting on the airs of a teacher. This needed to be a natural process. He had given Qin Wushuang space, and took care of Qin Wushuang in the dark. It was to nurture such an atmosphere and allow Qin Wushuang to slowly develop a sense of belonging to the Green Cloud Palace. Tan Zhongqi believed in his own eyes. Since Qin Wushuang had devoted himself to the Baiyu country, in the future, he would do the same for the Green Cloud Palace. In fact, it was the case. Although Qin Wushuang had not entered the sect for long, during this time, regardless of being at the Stargaze Palace or his homeland, he could feel the protection from his teacher, Tan Zhongqi. If it weren't for his protection, those martial saints from the subordinate countries would not have feared him so much. Thus, unconsciously, Qin Wushuang's sense of identity with Tan Zhongqi had also strengthened. For example, during this advanced disciple exam, Qin Wushuang really wanted to get a perfect score and make his teacher happy. Although Qin Wushuang did not make any promises to Zhou Fu, from tonight's conversation, Qin Wushuang still felt touched. Not only did he not feel disgusted, he felt a sense of warmth. After all, today was the first day that all his fellow disciples had met. As the eldest senior sister, Zhou Fu was able to put down her status and honestly tell him these things. It was enough to show that this eldest senior sister was sincere. She was a very serious and responsible eldest senior sister. It was a fortunate thing to have such a fellow disciple. In the early hours of the next day, Qin Wushuang woke up early and strolled around the Green Cloud Palace. After breakfast, he walked towards the main palace. With his demonic performance on the first day, Qin Wushuang's reputation had increased greatly. Now, almost the entire Stargaze Palace was talking about Qin Wushuang. They were discussing whether he could match Wei Yi's outstanding performance from 16 years ago and get a perfect score. Thus, when Qin Wushuang appeared again at the square before the main palace, naturally, he attracted a lot of attention. Many disciples of the Stargaze Palace even pointed at him and expressed their admiration. Qin Wushuang remained calm and collected as he turned a deaf ear to the gazes from all around him. While he was walking forward, suddenly, Qin Wushuang looked at the crowd from the side. It was because from the corner of his eyes, he saw an extremely vicious and hateful gaze shooting out from the crowd. The gaze stopped for a moment on Qin Wushuang. He looked over and saw a figure disappear from the crowd in a few steps. Although it was a group of lower-level disciples, Qin Wushuang still recognized clearly that person was Qi Yinfeng, the one he had defeated and humiliated at the West Wind Hollow. He was the direct grandson of Qi Xingnan, the martial saint of the Great Wu. Apparently, the news of Qin Wushuang killing Qi Xingnan with his own hands had reached Qi Yinfeng's ears. This made Qi Yinfeng extremely shocked. From then on, he hated Qin Wushuang to the bone. Qin Wushuang glanced at him and thought inwardly, "This Qi Yinfeng is the direct grandson of Qi Xingnan. I am afraid he holds a grudge against me. Sooner or later, he will be a source of trouble. Now, since we are from the same sect, I cannot kill him. However, don't provoke me. Or else, even if I will be punished, I will kill him to prevent future troubles." After he made up his mind, suddenly, someone called out from behind him, "Brother Qin." He looked back and saw Tong Yen from the Lihua Palace running out excitedly with a face full of joy. "Brother Qin, it's you. I was worried that you would not make it back. Yesterday at the Laba Festival, with so many people at the square, I didn't know where to find you. I didn't expect that when I came back in the evening, I would hear everyone talking about your name. Now, I knew that you had returned to the Stargaze Palace and had achieved great results." Since they both came from the Bayou country, naturally, Tong Yen was extremely proud of Qin Wushuang's results. Plus, with the good news from his family, the Bayou country had turned the crisis into safety and had defeated the Great Wu. The only regret was that the martial saint had died. However, due to the sudden appearance of Qin Wushuang, not only did the Bayou country not collapse, they had become like the sun in the middle of the sky. More good news came from the martial saint mountain. The original purple-robed great honored warrior had taken over Qiu Lingda's position as the martial saint. He had reached the upper sky and ruled the martial saint mountain. He had been conferred the title of the new martial saint by the Bayou emperor. His family had solemnly instructed Tong Yen to think of ways to build a good relationship with Qin Wushuang at the Stargaze Palace. Tong Yen had been waiting here since early in the morning. Finally, Qin Wushuang had appeared. Naturally, he was extremely excited. "Brother Qin, the good news from the Bayou country has been spreading. These days we have been so energetic, ha ha. Those cowards from the Great Wu had clearly lost their arrogance. They would take a detour when they see us. Brother Qin, all of this is thanks to your display of invincible might when you returned this time. Now, He Zichong and those guys had their jaws dropped when they learned that you are an upper sky realm warrior." Qin Wushuang smiled lightly and asked, "How did you guys do in the exam?" When Tong Yen mentioned this, he could not help but feel somewhat disappointed as he said with a bitter face, "Anyways, I did not have any hope today. I only hope that I would not have a bad result in the initial disciple exam. For now, I do not have the ambition to become an advanced disciple. I hope that in 3 or 5 years, I will have the power to aim for this goal." Tong Yen was calm and did not bite off more than he could chew. Although they were martial arts students from the subordinate countries and had good talent, they were not outstanding in the environment of the Stargaze Palace. Thus, they could only start from the initial stage. In 3 or 5 years, it was still a grand goal to aim for the advanced disciple. Thus, Tong Yen was not extremely confident when he said it. "Okay, Brother Qin, the exam is about to start. Let's see if we can get together again on the new year." Tong Yen waved his hand and returned to the group of initial stage disciples. Qin Wushuang also walked quickly towards the exam area for the advanced disciples. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 212. The assessment continued to proceed in an orderly manner. 600 advanced disciples were led by the examiners to an empty space behind the main palace. Around this empty space, there were 6 long pillars made of unknown jade that gave people a sense of mystery. That head examiner said, "This place is a training formation of the Stargaze Palace. The place you are at is the core area of the formation. At that time, this formation will activate the spiritual qi and form a pressure to test you. If you cannot endure it, you can choose to walk out of these 6 pillars and you will not be suppressed by the power of the formation. This is a test of your endurance and the content of the 4th round of exam. Do you all understand?" "Yes." "Okay, according to the length of time you can endure, there will also be a grade. You will know the corresponding score when you come out. Are you all ready?" "Yes." Everyone roared in unison. Apparently, after a night of rest, these advanced disciples had regained a lot of their energy and stamina. Thus, their fighting spirit had become vigorous again. Apparently, they hoped to get a good result on the second day of the exam. Okay, let's start. On the giant empty space, 600 people sat down cross-legged and found their spots. Between each person, there was a certain amount of space, and they would not interfere with each other. Yan Feng was also among this group. He found a spot and sat down. Suddenly, he raised his head and saw Qin Wushuang sitting across from him. He blinked his eyes slightly. "Senior brother Qin, this time, you will get full marks again," Yan Feng said. Qin Wushuang smiled lightly and nodded. "Concentrate, don't get distracted. Focus and take care of yourself. Circulate the genuine qi inside your body and circulate it." Although Qin Wushuang did not know the exact details of this spiritual qi formation, from his experience, to this kind of spiritual qi invasion, it would be the best way to protect oneself to not be disturbed. The more distracted and scattered one's attention, the easier it would be to be defeated. As soon as the spiritual energy array was activated, the 600 people present could immediately feel a force pressing in from all directions. That feeling was as if they were in a low-lying area and suddenly found that the tide was gushing in from all directions and surrounding them tightly, the kind of feeling that not even a drop of water could pass through. A portion of the advanced disciples, who didn't have a high cultivation base, immediately felt their chests tighten and hurriedly circulated their qi to resist. Qin Wushuang was completely unaware. He lowered his eyebrows and closed his eyes as if he was meditating, completely ignoring the changes in the outside world. Regardless of whether it was thunder or wind, lightning or hail, it seemed to be unable to move him at all. Standing like a pine tree, sitting like a bell. At this moment, Qin Wushuang was like a bell. Wind and rain did not move him. It was as if even the collapse of heaven and earth could not make him open his eyes. The waves of spiritual power were like ripples. That said, those ripples were not the kind that spread outward. Instead, they were the kind that pressed inward, the kind that was constantly shrinking. It felt like an infinitely long rope was tying him up round and round, constantly curling and circling him. Although the activation of spiritual power was not like the impact of stormy waves, nor was it as violent as the storm, it was continuous and long, constantly pushing forward at a uniform speed. Bit by bit, it was constantly accumulating, like a trickle of water turning into a river, like an inch of fine soil turning into a mountain. Naturally, the pressure was accumulating and becoming stronger. After a quarter of an hour, some advanced disciples began to feel agitated and began to feel incomparably fierce. Their breathing became rapid, and their faces were flushed red. It was as if they would die if they were not careful. However, these people were still stubbornly holding on. No one stood out to express their abstention. Advanced disciples, in any case, were existences with status. Of the 600 advanced disciples present, naturally, no one wanted to be the first to stand out and declare their abstention. However, this kind of persistence soon became a kind of torture. Those senior disciples who were trying their best to hold on only felt a buzzing sound in their ears. Their internal organs felt as if they were going to burst out of their chests. Their bodies felt as if they were being squeezed and rubbed by an invisible hand. Even their facial features were being squeezed out of shape. Puff! Finally, someone could not hold on any longer and spat out a mouthful of blood. He staggered to his feet and staggered to the periphery of the pillar. This person also knew that if he continued to hold on, he was afraid that he would not even be able to keep his life, let alone strive for any test result. With the appearance of the first person to give up, the other advanced disciples who were stubbornly holding on immediately loosened their psychological defenses. Their willpower was also shaken. Once their willpower was shaken, they were not far from giving up. One after another, after an hour, more than half of the advanced disciples had withdrawn. And these people were obviously going to get a low score. Some of the advanced disciples who remained in the field were still calm and relaxed. From their expressions, one could not see any discomfort at all. If one were to stand at the periphery and watch at this time, it would be easy to distinguish who had a high cultivation, who had strong endurance, who could hold on, and who would not be able to hold on. After an hour of the test, those with a high cultivation were obviously able to resolve the pressure easily, although the pressure was great. As for those with an average cultivation, although they were still able to hold on, they were obviously at the end of their tether. At this stage, the pressure of the spiritual power was no longer like a tide covering the surroundings. It was simply like digging a big hole, directly filling them up, and then filling the hole with soil bit by bit. It was the feeling of being buried alive, the oppressive and suffocating feeling of death. Whoosh! A few more people jumped up and ran to the periphery of the pillar as if they were running for their lives. If they held on for a while longer, they were afraid that even their hearts would be spat out from their mouth. At this point, this kind of pressure was no longer something that ordinary advanced disciples could suppress. At this moment, Yen Feng was also clenching his teeth and holding on. He wanted to stand up and give up a few times, but when he opened his eyes and saw Qin Wushuang's calm and composed expression, and that temperament that would not change even if a mountain collapsed in front of him, he was unconsciously influenced by it. Reluctantly holding on, he actually managed to hold on for another 15 minutes. At this time, Yen Feng's forehead had already begun to drip with sweat. Bean-sized beads of sweat kept falling down, and the blue veins on his forehead were twice as thick as usual. He knew that if he did not go out, the pressure of the spiritual power would invade his body and directly burst his blood vessels and tendons. He sighed helplessly in his heart. There were only a few dozen people left in the huge array, and most of them were innate experts. Looking at Qin Wushuang again, he still seemed to be meditating, and there was no pressure at all. From his expression, there was no pressure at all. It was as if this was not a spiritual power array at all, but a hot spring, which made him very comfortable and focused on enjoying. However, just as Yen Feng thought, Qin Wushuang was enjoying himself very much at this time. He was different from the others. The others, even the innate expert disciples, were struggling to resist the pressure of the spiritual power. Only Qin Wushuang, like a Taotai, was absorbing the spiritual power released from the spiritual power array. The spiritual power released by this spiritual power array was very rich. It was more than 10 times richer than the spiritual power when practicing outside. When Qin Wushuang touched it, it was naturally as suitable as hitting a pillow when he was sleepy. Unconsciously, the power of the deep north was activated, constantly absorbing the spiritual power. At first, he only absorbed the spiritual power around him. When the power of the deep north began to operate at high speed, the spiritual power around him was not enough for him to absorb, and the range of absorption naturally expanded. His fingertips moved slightly, and his hands were placed on his knees. It looked like a simple sitting posture, but Qin Wushuang himself was very clear that this was the hand gesture of the power of the deep north. His 2 thumbs were slightly tilted forward. He was using the Shaoshang acupoint, using the Shaoshang sword essence of the coagulated sword, and the power of the deep north, to absorb the spiritual power in front of him, entering from the Shaoshang acupoint, flowing around, and finally entering the Shanzhong acupoint. Qin Wushuang was already very familiar with this route. When he was in the Ling Shao main vein, he had absorbed the spiritual power of the inner core of the flame cloud vulture and the spiritual power of the black-clothed man. Naturally, he was familiar with this route, and there was not the slightest feeling of stagnation. Yen Feng, who was already unable to support himself, suddenly felt the pressure on his body lighten, and the spiritual power binding his body seemed to be suddenly taken away by someone. His body, which seemed to be tied up, was suddenly untied. It was incomparably easy and carefree. Yen Feng was overjoyed. For a moment, he did not understand what had happened. He only felt that the spiritual power around him, as soon as it touched the surface of his skin, was immediately absorbed by some overbearing force, and was completely unable to form an effective binding on his body. This made Yen Feng, who was about to give up, feel as if he had grabbed onto a sampan when he was drowning. Wild with joy, he hurriedly sat cross-legged back to his original position and pretended to operate his qi again. Although Qin Wushuang had not opened his eyes all this time, everything that Yen Feng felt was actually a deliberate action by him. He felt that Yen Feng was about to give up. Considering the friendship between the two of them, and the fact that Yen Feng had led him to the Nature Manifestation Valley, he was able to obtain the 8th Spiritual Dawn and the Khanate Initial Stage Spiritual Dawn. With all these good karma, Qin Wushuang naturally would not sit by and do nothing when there was an opportunity to guide Yen Feng. However, Qin Wushuang had grasped the area just right. The area of absorption was also the area between Yen Feng and himself, and absolutely did not go deep into the area where the others were. Therefore, the other advanced disciples in the surroundings did not notice the slight changes on this side. In this way, apart from Qin Wushuang, Yen Feng had become the most relaxed person in this formation. After all, the other disciples, even if they were Khanate, simply could not absorb the spiritual power under the impact of this kind of spiritual power. After all, the power of Deep North was a perverse technique that not everyone had. Those people could only resist the spiritual power without any formalities, but Qin Wushuang directly absorbed the spiritual power. This difference in and out was enough to show that it was fatal. Even the invigilators outside the formation obviously could not detect the minute changes in this unforeseen event. 4 hours had passed, and there were continuously people giving up. The number of people in the formation also decreased. In the end, the Khanate advanced disciples also withdrew one by one. There were very few people left in the formation, only 4 people. And among these 4 people, apart from Qin Wushuang and Yen Feng, the other 2 Khanate disciples were already sweating profusely, and could give up at any time. Of course, at this moment, Yen Feng naturally could not help but be sweating profusely. However, this sweating profusely on his head was actually an act. Although forcing oneself to sweat was also a very difficult thing to do, compared to resisting the endless spiritual power, it was obviously easier to do it by sweating. Even the invigilators outside the formation were speechless at the performance of this dark horse, Yen Feng. P.S. Today's update is complete. The great battle in November has entered the 4th day of the last. What is the outcome? We will still work hard. Li Tian needs monthly votes, and needs the greatest encouragement from the warriors of Galaxy. Can we win in one fell swoop, and can we remain in the top 15 of the overall list? Who will give Li Tian the answer? Not me, not the starting point, but all the readers of Galaxy. With the monthly votes, please continue to support Li Tian. In the final battle, we will charge together. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 213. At this time, Yen Feng was in disbelief. He wasn't a brainless person. He glanced at the struggling performance of the other 2 Xiantian lords, then looked at Qin Wushuang's calm and relaxed expression. He more or less had a premonition in his heart. For a moment, his heart was filled with indescribable gratitude, but he didn't dare to show it. He could only continue to pretend that he was drenched in sweat. After a while, the remaining 2 Xiantian lords finally couldn't hold on any longer and stumbled outside. In this way, Qin Wushuang and Yen Feng, one in front and one behind, became a unique scene. Yen Feng knew that he couldn't stay any longer, or else he would be exposed. He was stunned for a moment, then pretended to be exhausted and moved outside. As soon as he rushed out of the pillar, he lay on the ground and gasped for air. This scene looked as if he was as tired as he could be. The invigilator outside looked at the hourglass, then looked at Qin Wushuang, who was in the arena. According to the rules, once the sand in the hourglass was used up, it would be a full score. At this moment, there wasn't much sand left in the hourglass. At this time, the advanced disciples outside were all sitting cross-legged, adjusting their breathing and circulating their qi to ease the impact they received in the spiritual energy array, so as to avoid internal injuries. A portion of the advanced disciples who didn't receive a huge impact stood to the side, looking at Qin Wushuang in the spiritual energy array in shock. Their expressions were as if they were looking at a monster, obviously speechless at Qin Wushuang's crazy performance. Even those upper sky advanced disciples who had wanted to compete with Qin Wushuang could not help but sigh inwardly. Was it luck or bad luck that they had encountered such a monstrous person? At this time, each of their hearts had a kind of, since Jade was born, why was it born bright sigh. The invigilator's eyes didn't move as he stared at the hourglass. Finally, the last grain of sand had leaked out. The invigilator let out a long sigh. His heart was also somewhat excited. Another full score had appeared. In history, in the advanced disciples assessment, there would be a full score in the first 3 rounds every 3 to 5 years. But almost all of them, after entering the spiritual energy array, were unable to hold on until the last moment. And this Qin Wushuang had finally succeeded. He successfully tied the record set by Wei Yi 16 years ago. The invigilator saw that Qin Wushuang still had an expression of enjoyment and was in a dilemma. According to the rules, once the time in the hourglass ended, the test would also end. However, this Qin Wushuang clearly looked very relaxed. He could not help but want to know to what extent Qin Wushuang could hold on. However, the assessment time was limited, and he couldn't let Qin Wushuang waste everyone's time inside. He could only remind him helplessly, "The disciple inside, you've already scored full marks. The test is over, you can come out now." When Qin Wushuang heard this greeting, he couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. He was going to leave just like that? Since the rules were like this, he didn't want to break them. He could only reluctantly stand up and walk out with a face full of helplessness and regret. His relaxed demeanor was as if he had just had a good sleep. It was very comfortable. The advanced disciples outside were all speechless to the extreme. Everyone was unable to resist this spiritual power, but he still had an expression of reluctance when the time was up. This made those advanced disciples who couldn't hold on any longer feel a sense of imbalance in their hearts. Full marks, haha, full marks again. Senior Brother Ku from the Second Palace Master's line greeted him with a smile. "Senior Brother Qin, you're really something. It's hard for you not to get first place in this advanced disciple assessment." He, as expected of a disciple personally selected by Master. "Senior Brother Qin, this little brother's surname is Ku, and I'm also from the Second Palace Master's line. I must seek your guidance in the future." This senior brother Ku had already struck up a conversation with Qin Wushuang last time. This time, seeing that Qin Wushuang was so outstanding, he naturally couldn't help but go up and greet him. He wanted to build momentum for Qin Wushuang and the Second Palace Master's line. Although he entered the sect very early, in front of Qin Wushuang, he didn't dare to call himself senior brother. Instead, he addressed Qin Wushuang as senior brother. Indeed, as this senior brother Ku had said, Qin Wushuang had achieved full marks in all 4 rounds. He was already far ahead of the others. The difference between him and the second place had been pulled to 80 points. Without a doubt, the first place of this exam would not leave. Now, everyone's only question was whether Qin Wushuang could match the record from 16 years ago and become another advanced disciple who had achieved full marks in all 6 categories. In the end, all such figures would become the pillars of the Stargaze Palace. Wei Yi was like this, and all the seniors before him were like this for generations. Those who had achieved full marks in all 6 categories had a place in the history of the Stargaze Palace. And that Yen Feng had benefited from his outstanding performance in this round. His result had also risen from the original 50 to the top 30. Although this result would not allow him to become a core disciple in the end, in the ranking of the advanced disciples, the higher the result, the more importance the teachers would place on him. It was a virtuous cycle. The 5th round of the exam was the easiest and most direct among all the exams. It directly tested one's training level. This round was a checkpoint. It would eliminate a large group of people. Firstly, those advanced disciples who were not in the upper sky realm would have a pitiful score in this round. And those advanced disciples in the upper sky realm would also be tested for their potential, the richness of their spiritual chi, and their current stage. Although this test appeared direct, it was extremely subtle. Even if they were all upper sky disciples, the difference in points between them could be huge. The 5th round of the exam could be said to be a reshuffle. Different from the previous rounds, the upper sky disciples were divided into one group and the pre-sky disciples into another. This way, it was clear how many upper sky disciples there were among the advanced disciples. Indeed, as Yen Feng had said, there were close to 30 upper sky disciples among the advanced disciples. One must say that this Stargaze Palace was indeed the #1 powerhouse in the great Luo Empire. Just the younger generation of disciples had more than 100 upper sky disciples. This result was enough to suppress all the subordinate countries. The great Luo Empire only had a few dozen subordinate countries. On average, each subordinate country had less than one upper sky martial saint. It was no wonder that within the great Luo Empire, all the powerhouses, regardless of the government or the people, would admire the Stargaze Palace. It was a giant existence. For this round of exam, the order was based on the previous result. The better the result, the later they would appear. Thus, Qin Wushuang's round of exam was arranged to be the last. Of course, Qin Wushuang was extremely happy. A moment ago, he had absorbed a lot of spiritual qi from that spiritual formation. A part of it was still swimming in his sea of spiritual qi and had not merged into his sea of spiritual qi. He could use this time to merge these spiritual qi into his sea of spiritual qi and continue to strengthen the accumulation process. Qin Wushuang firmly believed that at this speed, he would not be too far away from the middle stage. This time, Qin Wushuang felt that he had gained a lot from absorbing the spiritual qi from the formation. The spiritual martial force was a stage to accumulate spiritual qi and also a stage to train the body. Originally, with a normal speed, it would be impossible to break through from the initial stage to the middle stage of the spiritual martial force in a few months. Even that senior brother Wei Yi, who had the natural spiritual roots, had spent 12 years to break through from the initial stage to the middle stage. Who was Wei Yi? He was the publicly recognized #1 in the younger generation of the Stargaze Palace. He had the most potential and was the future leader of the Stargaze Palace. He was being trained as the successor of the entire Stargaze Palace. Regardless of the treatment, he was given priority. He could be said to be the favored son of the gods. Even for such a person, who had so many unique advantages, it still took him a full 12 years to reach this level. Normally, if Qin Wushuang wanted to break through, he would need to walk a long way. Even Tan Zhongqi did not expect Qin Wushuang to break through to the middle stage in a short period of time. However, Qin Wushuang had a feeling that with the power of Deep North, he had the power to break through to the middle stage. Initially, to break through to the middle stage, not only did he need to keep absorbing spiritual qi, he also needed to strengthen his body. Or else, if the strength of the body could not keep up with the strength of the spiritual qi would engulf the body and cause a backlash. However, during this period of training, Qin Wushuang was surprised to find that when he was absorbing the spiritual qi, his body did not show any abnormal reaction. Initially, when the spiritual qi entered the body, at least the muscles and the meridians would have some impact and reaction. However, his body was peaceful and natural. It was as if the vast ocean was absorbing a trickle of water. There was no pressure and he did not even feel the slightest discomfort. Qin Wushuang was slightly surprised. Could it be that his body could ignore the impact of the spiritual qi? He was extremely cautious. Each time, he repeatedly tested and confirmed that absorbing the spiritual qi would not pose any threat to his body. Only then did he feel reassured. Perhaps that experience at the cave under the Great Song Mountain was somewhat special. My body should have been modified by some mysterious power. Or else, how could my body not feel the slightest discomfort when absorbing the spiritual qi? During the training of the spiritual martial force, regardless of the initial stage or the perfect stage, every bit of spiritual qi absorbed into the body was a form of tempering for the body. Thus, the training of the spiritual martial force was a process of communication between the body and nature. It was a double step of training the qi and the body. For someone like Qin Wushuang, when absorbing spiritual qi, his body did not feel any pressure. If he told others, most likely the 5 palace masters would be so shocked that their jaws would drop. It was because this was beyond the common knowledge of the training of the spiritual martial force. It seems that under the Great Song Mountain, as I had predicted, there are many unknown secrets. Only someone like me, who had dealt with the Great Song Mountain for many years and treated the Great Song Mountain as my mother, could understand the mysteries of the Great Song Mountain. If I have the chance, I must explore that cave again. While Qin Wushuang absorbed the spiritual qi, he thought silently. P.S. Sorry, I was a bit sleepy today and took a nap in the afternoon. That's why the update was late. But it's still 4 in the morning, so I can't leave. While I'm at it, I'll recommend 2 books. I'll recommend a new book called Refining Sun. Book number 1772766. The vast starry sky was the source of power and authority in the star spirit continent. Everyone had a guardian star in the sky that belonged to them. A dead sun, a 3-legged crow that was still bleeding for thousands of years after being shot by an arrow. This scene shocked everyone's heart. A freelance photographer, Yu Feng, was brought to the star spirit continent by this strange celestial phenomenon and started a magnificent and fantastical adventure. Book title: Fire Across the Universe. Book number 1771461. Advertisement slogan: 1,000-year fire Qilin possession, vowing to fire across the universe. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.qidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 214. After 2 hours, almost all of the first 20 upper sky advanced disciples had come out. Qin Wushuang calculated that it was almost his turn. From the expression of those upper sky advanced disciples, apparently, they were somewhat disappointed with this exam. After all, this exam was a threshold. Whether one could enter the top 3 and become a core disciple, after this round they would have an idea. Among them, a portion of the upper sky had reached the upper sky spiritual martial force with the help of the upper sky initial stage pill. Apparently, they did not have the qualifications to become a core disciple. However, everyone wanted to be lucky. Each of them hoped that some miracle would happen during the exam and allow them to escape the inspection. However, for a major sect like the Stargaze Palace, how could they make such a low-level mistake? The tool used to test the upper sky was a spiritual skyboard. It was divided into 5 areas according to the 5 elements like 5 stars. In the middle of the round board, there was a giant sparkling and translucent jade stone. Apparently, it was used to test the spiritual qi. That jade stone was in the shape of a bar. Each section had a regular pattern. Qin Wushuang. That head examiner smiled lightly. Yes. Qin Wushuang answered. Now, the entire Stargaze Palace is paying attention to you. They are watching to see if you can get a perfect score in the advanced disciple exam. This is a crucial test, are you ready?
Yes.
Qin Wushuang answered. Okay, please open your hand and press your 5 fingers on the corresponding 5 elemental areas. Activate the spiritual qi in your sea of spiritual qi with all your strength and do not leave any room. Do you understand? Activate with all my strength. Qin Wushuang looked at that spiritual sky board with some hesitation. Especially that jade stone, could it withstand the full activation of the spiritual qi of an upper sky realm warrior? Yes, don't worry, this spiritual sky jade board was created for the advanced disciple exam. For sure, it will withstand the test. Unless you are at the middle stage and activate too much spiritual qi, you will not be able to destroy this thing. Qin Wushuang could not help but look at it a few more times. There was such a miraculous thing? Regardless, since that examiner had said it this way, Qin Wushuang would not doubt it. Stretching out his right hand, Zhang Xian focused all his attention on the attack. As he pressed his 5 fingers down, the qi sea in his body immediately opened. Spiritual power flowed along the path of the heavenly pulse condensed sword and rushed toward the heavenly spirit chart. The examiner smiled and said, "Do you see this piece of jade?" There were a total of 5 boxes, and each box represented 10 points. You Xiantian disciples are already able to obtain 50 basic points. As for Hotian realm martial artists, they can only be evaluated below 50 basic points. On the other hand, a Xiantian realm senior disciple would be evaluated with a base score of more than 50 points. This is the difference between you two. Although they are all innate masters, each of these 5 grids is a watershed. If your spiritual energy can make one of the jades light up, you will get 10 points, and so on. If you can make 5 jades light up, you will get 50 points, which means you will get full marks again. The examiner explained everything in detail, allowing Qin Wushuang to fully digest the content of the assessment. Qin Wushuang did not have the slightest bit of distracting thoughts. The spiritual power in his body continuously surged out. On the first try, one of the jades suddenly lit up, emitting a bright red light, appearing incomparably square. Good, this is the fire attribute. Your spiritual energy can already light up the fire attribute in the heavenly spirit chart. Not bad, keep up the good work. Before he finished speaking, another jade on the heavenly spirit chart lit up. This time, it was completely green. Very good, this is the wood attribute. Congratulations, you can get 20 points. Qin Wushuang secretly sneered. Another stream of spiritual energy surged out from his ring finger, directly entering the left side of the heavenly spirit chart. Left, west, right, east. This left side corresponded to the west side, which corresponded to the metal attribute. Sure enough, on the jade, a white light suddenly shone, and another box lit up. The examiner praised, "Very good, 3 boxes. Qin Wushuang, you are the senior disciple who has completed the most in this assessment." Of course, all of this was not over. Qin Wushuang urged again, and another stream of spiritual energy gushed out from his index finger. The heavenly spirit chart only felt a slight tremor, and a box on the heavenly spirit chart suddenly lit up, emitting a mysterious light. This was the north side, which corresponded to the water attribute. At this moment, the examiner had already held his breath. There was a trace of surprise in his eyes, but more of it was anticipation. This was a very urgent feeling, a feeling of longing to witness a miracle. He had to admit that he had already appreciated Qin Wushuang to a certain extent. The boy in front of him was really too powerful. Looking at his appearance, he was not at all strenuous like the other Xiantian disciples. His strength was evenly distributed, and in understatement, he passed 4 tests consecutively. Now, in this last test, he felt that there was no reason why Qin Wushuang could not pass it. At this moment, he had almost forgotten his own identity. He was completely in the position of a spectator, watching Qin Wushuang's expression to his heart's content, instead of being an examiner for Qin Wushuang. In one breath, Qin Wushuang spurted out the qi from his middle finger. Once again, the heavenly spirit chart emitted a slight buzzing sound. That jade stone in the middle suddenly lit up and emitted a dazzling yellow light. 5 boxes of jade stone, 5 rays of light blossomed like hundreds of flowers. It was extremely resplendent and made that examiner could not help but clap his hands and praise. Good job, Qin Wushuang, full marks, full marks. Qin Wushuang smiled lightly and pulled back his right hand from the heavenly spirit chart with a smile. A moment ago, he had not exerted all his strength. He had not even used half of his spiritual qi. Even so, his performance had already made that examiner cry out in joy. 5 rounds, 500 points. That examiner encouraged Qin Wushuang with a somewhat excited tone. Qin Wushuang, keep working hard. For the last round, I believe that you will pass with full marks. A new perfect score is about to appear. For sure, the Stargaze Palace record that has been dormant for 16 years will be broken again. Instantly, news of Qin Wushuang's enchanting performance spread out. Each of those advanced disciples outside could not find any other emotion besides admiration. Even if they were competitors, they could only admit their inferiority when they met someone like Qin Wushuang. They could only admit defeat and fight for the remaining 2 spots. After these 5 rounds of competition, Qin Wushuang's lead had increased by more than 100 points. In other words, even if he gave up in the last round and the second place got a full 100 points, it would not affect his position as the champion. One could almost say that this was a rare grand occasion in the history of the Stargaze Palace's Advanced Disciple exam. Before the exam had ended, the champion had already emerged. Now there were only 2 suspense. First, it would depend on the last round of the exam who would get the remaining 2 spots. The other suspense was also the biggest one in the Stargaze Palace. Of course, it would depend on whether Qin Wushuang could get full marks and equal the record set by Wei Yi 16 years ago. The last round, comprehensive exam. However, this round of exam would be held on the 3rd day. Up to this point, the exam on the 2nd day had already ended. It was also getting late. After a night of rest, the 3rd day would be the last day of the exam. The exam for the 3 echelons of the Stargaze Palace would end in 3 days. Then, it would be the core ranking competition that would last for half a month. It would be the grand finale before the new year. After the end of the ranking competition, it would be the new year. They would bid farewell to the old and welcome the new. Thus, no one wanted to bring their regrets into the new year. For this core ranking competition, they would give it their all. However, this time, strangely, everyone did not discuss the core ranking competition ahead of time. For the 5 lines of the 5 palace masters, many disciples of the Shakyamuni and elders were discussing one topic. Could Qin Wushuang from the line of the 2nd palace master obtain a full mark? Could he do what Wei Yi had done 16 years ago? In the history of the Stargaze Palace, besides the line of the head palace master, no other disciple from the other palaces had obtained this honor. If Qin Wushuang had obtained this full mark, it would be a new record in the Stargaze Palace. Tan Zhongqi had left the main palace early and returned to the Green Cloud Palace. For this exam, he decided to keep a low profile and let his disciples perform. For the other palace masters, besides the head palace master, all of them stayed in the main palace. Zhong Wuyin, the 3rd palace master, laughed. 4th, 5th, for this advanced disciple exam, the winner is destined to be from the line of the 2nd palace master. This time, 2nd will be proud. Tian Zhixing, the 5th palace master, sighed helplessly. This time, 2nd is really lucky. Last time, I was already feeling depressed when he tried to take that Qin Wushuang to his line. Everyone knows that those who could emerge from the subordinate countries and become the winner of the martial arts student exam are 100% good seedlings. Unfortunately, he had snatched the first soup. At that time, if I had gotten him, I would be the one to be proud. Although Tian Zhixing and Tan Zhongqi had a little bit of unhappiness because of what happened in West Chu, he was a humorous person and did not hold grudges. He would not go against Tan Zhongqi and would only sigh. However, Leng Qiuqi, the fourth palace master, still maintained his cold face as he sneered. It's not too bad to be fat. No matter how good you are in the advanced disciple exam, there is a limit. It's just a matter of not being able to enter the top 10 of the core ranking competition. Tian Zhixing sighed. Fourth, you can't say it like that. Qin Wushuang had just entered this year. Even if he could not enter the top 10, he still has a lot of chances. Now, he is only 17 or 18 years old. Give him 3 or 5 years to grow, it would not be a problem for him to enter the top 10. Zhong Wuyin said curiously. I say, fifth, that Qin Wushuang holds a grudge against your 2 core disciples. Why are you speaking for him? I am only speaking the truth. In the end, it's always a good thing for such a figure to appear in the Stargaze Palace. Now I would like to see if he can get a perfect 600 points. If he can, in the future, this kid will become a supreme figure like Wei Yi. It would be the fortune of the Stargaze Palace. Tian Zhixing had an open mind. However, Zhong Wuyin said, perfect score? How could it be that easy? Even if he had the strength, the line of the head palace master would not be happy to see this. As soon as he said these words, both Leng Qiuqi and Tian Zhixing's expression froze as they revealed a strange smile. They could not help but look around as if they were afraid that the head palace master would suddenly come out from the corner. Sorry, there is still a second chapter, it will continue to come out. Li Tian would never dig a hole for himself and develop the bad habit of delaying chapters. He would not find an excuse for himself to be lazy and continue to write. Only, everyone will have to wait a little longer. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 215. Also inside the main palace, outside the private forbidden area of the head palace master, a head butler who was in charge of the advanced disciple exam was standing outside carefully. He had come to see the head palace master. Initially, this head butler also came from the line of the head palace master. Thus, he had a strong sense of belonging to the line of the head palace master and was extremely loyal. After a moment, a boy walked out and said with a smile, Mr. Butler, the head palace master invites you in. That head butler nodded with a smile and followed the boy inside. After passing through a few corridors, they arrived at a secluded, forbidden secret chamber. This secret chamber was like a maze, full of twists and turns. If it weren't for the boy leading the way, it would be difficult for the chief deacon to guarantee that he wouldn't get lost. Finally, before a giant secret room, the boy stopped and said respectfully, Mr. Butler, please go in. That butler did not dare to neglect as he restrained his steps and walked in quietly. Inside the secret room, the head palace master was resting with his eyes closed. When he saw him enter, he slowly opened his eyes. Little Tang, what business do you have with me? Zhuo Buchuan, the head palace master asked with a smile. The head palace master had always presented himself as a generous person. Of course, he was no exception. Tomorrow, I will be in charge of the advanced disciple exam. I have some questions and would like to ask you to give me some pointers. That head butler answered carefully. Oh, the head palace master said lightly. As the head butler, did you not understand the rules of the exam? Or could it be that you do not understand the rules? Replying to first palace master, this subordinate is very clear about the rules and details. Then what other questions are there? The head palace master asked lightly. I would like to know, what do you think of that Qin Wushuang's results? The head palace master frowned slightly. What? Little Tang, do you think his results are fake? No, that Qin Wushuang does have exceptional talent and his results are not fake. Only tomorrow is the last round of exam. For this round of exam, should we continue to let Qin Wushuang's limelight rise, or should we suppress him? When that butler Tang said this, he was also trembling with fear. To put it bluntly, he had come this time with a bit of fluke mentality. His performance was naturally to curry favor with the first palace master, which was equivalent to a huge gamble. If the head palace master was really hinting, then he could use his status as the head deacon to suppress Qin Wushuang's results tomorrow, making it impossible for Qin Wushuang to break the head palace master's faction's monopoly of getting full marks in the advanced disciple assessment. Based on his understanding of the first palace master's faction, he felt that the first palace master's faction did not wish for Qin Wushuang to be in the limelight. After all, at the Stargaze Palace, everyone was used to seeing the line of the head palace master in the limelight. In the Stargaze Palace, in order to stand out from the line of the head palace master, this line would be the core. Now that Qin Wushuang was in the limelight, it was obvious that he had overshadowed the limelight of the first palace master's faction. At the very least, the champion of the advanced disciple assessment was taken away by him. Now, if Qin Wushuang were to get a perfect score, it would create a new history. Thus, he decided to test the head palace master's opinion. Zhuobuchuan shook his head lightly and suddenly asked, "Is it your own decision to come here, or is it the combined opinion of all the other deacons?" "It's my own opinion. The other deacons do not know." Zhuobuchuan gave a light sigh and nodded. "Okay, then you can go back." "Go back?" Suddenly, Zhuobuchuan's expression became serious. "If you are not going back, do you want to stay here for the night? Little Tang, you came from the line of the head palace master. I understand that you are loyal to this faction. However, if you feel that you should do something evil and break the iron rules of the Stargaze Palace, then you would be the greatest sinner of the Stargaze Palace. Since you came to me today to talk about these things, you should be punished. Since it's your first offense, I am only giving you a warning. There will not be a next time." That Deacon Tang's face was filled with shame and shame. He felt that he had acted as a petty person in vain. Hearing the tone of the head palace master, apparently, he did not have the intention to suppress him. Although the Stargaze Palace has set up 5 palace masters, in the end, the Stargaze Palace is still a whole. Even if there are some conflicts between the 5 factions, it is all internal competition. This is a form of healthy competition where we promote each other and progress together. If we were to suppress them with malicious intentions, then it would be a malicious competition. The result would be to drain the pond to fish, burn the forest to hunt. It would be a strategy to cut off the root. In the end, it would cut off the spiritual source of the Stargaze Palace. Without the core spirit of unity, how could the Stargaze Palace become the core sect of the great Luo Empire? How could we defend against external invasions and deal with internal problems? His words made Deacon Tang feel extremely ashamed as he covered his face and retreated. Zhuobuchuan sighed helplessly. After he saw that Deacon Tang had retreated, he mumbled to himself after a while, "The Stargaze Palace does not have any enemies in the great Luo Empire. We have lived like princes for a long time and barely have any sense of risk." If we do not accept some external competition and pressure, not to mention the next generation of disciples, even the old guys would become complacent and become interested in internal conflicts. It's not a long-term plan since they have no sense of danger and no foresight. I must remind them. When he said here, suddenly, Zhuobuchuan revealed a trace of a knowing smile. He glanced at the door. Since you are here, why are you loitering around? Outside the door, that way he walked in with a light smile after his teacher had revealed his whereabouts. "It's an honor to meet you, teacher." "No need for formalities, For this exam, did those junior brothers have a good result? For the line of the head palace master, the head palace master did not ask about many matters. Instead, he had given Wei Yi full authority to take care of it. After all, he was the master of the entire Stargaze Palace. He had to take care of the major matters of the entire Stargaze Palace. Wei Yi could take care of the matters of his own lineage and slowly train his leadership skills. It would also build a good foundation for Wei Yi to take over the head palace. Besides a few abnormal performances, they were all okay. Of course, there were also some that performed well. Overall, it was about the same as before. Yes, for these matters, you can take care of it. Apparently, the head palace master did not care much about these matters. He looked at the door and asked, "A moment ago, Butler Tang came in. Do you know why he came?" "No, I didn't ask him when I saw him leave in shame." Sit down," Zhuo Buchuan said with a serious expression. Wei Yi did not neglect and sat down on the lower seat. "A moment ago, Butler Tang came to ask me whether we should suppress Qin Wushuang's momentum for tomorrow's advanced disciple exam. What do you think?" After a moment of thinking, Wei Yi shook his head. "I don't think it's appropriate." "Tell me the reason," Zhuo Buchuan asked with a somewhat gratified tone. "I think that Qin Wushuang's momentum has already been established. If we suppress him, it will not stop the mouths of the people in the world. Instead of suppressing him, it's better to let him come out. After all, to the Stargaze Palace, it's a great thing for Qin Wushuang to come out." Wei Yi's answer was extremely upright. Zhuo Buchuan laughed. I feel gratified that you are able to say these words. I've always heard that our core disciples had a tyrannical atmosphere at the Virtuous Cloud Summit. I never asked about this matter. Do you know why? I don't know. Inwardly, Wei Yi was slightly shocked. Regarding the tyrannical atmosphere, Wei Yi might have contributed to it. After all, he was the senior brother and had more or less acted as a protective umbrella. Hearing his teacher's words, of course, he felt somewhat nervous. I wanted to test you and wait for you to realize it yourself. This is a form of breadth of mind. If I were to point it out, it would be too deliberate. I am waiting for you to realize it yourself. As a whole, the Stargaze Palace does not only have my line of descendants, and for the Stargaze Palace, it would not be enough to support such a huge business with only my disciples. I will not comment on your past actions. In the future, you should respect yourself. Wei Yi only felt waves of coldness from his back as cold sweat emerged. He had always thought that his sect had kept these things a secret and that his master would never know about it. Unexpectedly, his teacher knew everything like the back of his hand. In fact, to some extent, he was somewhat dissatisfied with his senior brother's actions. Teacher, I am slow-witted, please punish me. Zhuo Buchuan laughed freely. Why should I punish you? It's just a small matter, it's not a big deal. I just want you to understand that the gains and losses within the sect will never help the development of the Stargaze Palace. It will also not determine the height of the Stargaze Palace. You need to know that it's not spring when a single branch stands out, but when 100 flowers bloom together, spring fills the garden. Revealing a solemn expression, Wei Yi pondered over Zhuo Buchuan's words. If you were the chief disciple of one of the other branches and had such thoughts of internal strife, I definitely wouldn't be so harsh on you. However, you have the natural spiritual roots and are the head disciple of my line. You should set your sights on the overall height of the Stargaze Palace, and not fight for the gains and losses of the corners. The height will determine your vision will determine your breadth of mind, and your breadth of mind will determine your entire life stage. The head palace master instructed Wei Yi with sincere and heartfelt words. He was instructing this head disciple that he had always nurtured with great care. For someone with the natural spiritual roots, he did not want Wei Yi to squander such exceptional talent. Wei Yi's back was drenched in sweat. Teacher, I was stubborn in the past and had let you down. I will go back now and reflect on my mistake. Yes, Heir, the appearance of this Qin Wushuang is indeed a good thing to the Stargaze Palace. To you, it's also a good thing. Zhuo Buchuan said seriously. Before, I was worried that in the entire Stargaze Palace, there was no one that could match you. There was no one that could beat you and make you not dare to slack off. Now, such a figure has finally appeared. Heir, although Qin Wushuang might not have the natural spiritual roots, I am sure that his future is limitless. You two will be the two shining stars of the next generation of the Stargaze Palace. In the end, who will shine more brightly, it will depend on your own height. When the head palace master said up to this point, his tone was unusually solemn. Apparently, he was not trying to scare him by deliberately creating pressure for Wei Yi. Instead, he was speaking from the bottom of his heart. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 216. Then, he looked at Wei Yi with a meaningful gaze. Suddenly, he gave a light sigh. Currently, Qin Wushuang is also a piece of unpolished jade. His personality still needs to be polished. There is the so-called saying of how it's easy to break too hard. Although his actions in the subordinate countries were for revenge, there are suspicions of excessive killing. Yes, it's not a bad thing for a young man to be full of vigor. The difference between the two of you can be seen after the age of 40. Wei Yi was surprised. He knew that Qin Wushuang was exceptional. However, for a long time, he felt that in the Stargaze Palace, there was only one natural spiritual root. Of course, this advantage was not something the other disciples could compare with. Thus, he had gotten used to the feeling of being far ahead of others. Now, hearing his teacher's words that Qin Wushuang was on par with him and had the potential to surpass him, of course, Wei Yi was extremely shocked. Inwardly, cold sweat emerged from his forehead, and he did not dare to show the slightest trace of neglect. The height would determine your vision. Your vision would determine your breadth of mind. Your breadth of mind would determine your entire life stage. He pondered over his master's thought-provoking words, and gradually, he smacked his lips and began to understand. When he walked out of his teacher's secret room, suddenly, Wei Yi felt that his chest had opened up. Suddenly, some of the knots that had been tangled in his head had been untied. On the third day of the exam, it was still a cold day with the howling north wind. However, the exam atmosphere at the Stargaze Palace was extremely intense and fiery. All the advanced disciples had gathered and were waiting for the exam. Among them, Qin Wushuang was already extremely calm. After the baptism of the previous 5 rounds of exam, he no longer felt any pressure from this exam. Instead, he treated it as a form of enjoyment. The last round would be the overall exam. It would also be the final exam. Everyone, I believe that you have been looking forward to this last exam for a long time. The trial isn't complicated at all. Simply put, it's about hunting. Hunt. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang was moved. That examiner said with a smile. In the virtuous Heaven Mountain Range, the Stargaze Palace has a few dozen exam areas. Usually, no one is allowed to enter. It would only be opened to the public during the year-end assessment. The 600 of you will be divided into 10 groups and enter 10 different trial zones. We will put in the same number of Xiantian elementary spirit beasts as you do in each trial zone. Unlike the wild ones, these initial stage spiritual beasts were reared by the Stargaze Palace. In terms of spiritual power, they were inferior to wild elementary spirit beasts, but their offensive and defensive power were similar. There were 60 elementary spiritual beasts in each trial zone. Every time you capture one alive, you will get 20 points. Every time you kill one, you will get 10 points. Ah? Wouldn't there be more people than beasts then? Yeah, there's only one for each person on average. This score, those senior disciples started to discuss spiritedly. It was obvious that they didn't understand this rule. This was especially true for those who were weaker and didn't do well in the previous martial arts level test. As for the Xiantian advanced disciples, they were all calm and collected. Obviously, they had a great advantage in this kind of competition for resources. The examiner smiled and nodded. What you said is correct. There were more people, but fewer spirit beasts. It means that in the end, many of you will come out empty-handed and will not get half a point. And some of you will get full points. This is the exam. The goal of the exam is to distinguish the strong and the weak. Besides using all your strength, it's useless for you to complain. As soon as he said these words, those complaining disciples also shut their mouths obediently. The rules of the Stargaze Palace were like this. Everything depended on competition. If you were not strong enough, don't expect the rules to take care of you. The rules were to highlight the strong and whip the weak. There would not be any favoritism or sympathy. Suddenly, that examiner raised his voice again. There is one point that you must pay attention to. For this hunt, there is a rule that everyone must follow. That is, no one is allowed to steal the spiritual beasts from others. In other words, if you already got one spiritual beast, then congratulations, you have earned the corresponding point. If anyone comes to steal, the points will still belong to the person who started it. The person who stole will be disqualified. As soon as this rule was spoken, a portion of the upper sky warriors' faces darkened. Apparently, many of them had thought of stealing. However, the rules had restricted them from doing so. This rule will ensure that all of you have room to perform. Don't waste your time to deal with the robbing from your friends. Of course, if two people discover the spirit beast at the same time and they don't have it, either of them has the right to fight for it. However, there is no first come, first served rule. Whoever gets it before they get it will get it. Qin Wushuang thought about the rules of this exam and thought, since we cannot steal from each other, then for this exam, we must make the first move. From the beginning, we must maintain our strength and take the initiative to attack. It is not advisable to wait patiently or wait for time. The full score is 100 points. You can get these points by getting 5 living spiritual beasts. Indeed, that examiner said, finally, I must repeat one thing. For this last exam, the full score is still 100 points. In other words, if you get 100 points, you can choose to withdraw immediately. It is because in the future, even if you get more spiritual beasts, you will not get more than 100 points. Of course, if you want to use this to suppress your competitors, you can stay inside and fight with them. The rules also allow you to limit your competitors' points. Qin Wushuang smiled lightly and inwardly he thought, how bored would that person be to do that? Moreover, the competitors with close total scores may not be in the same training area. After the announcement of the rules, under the examiner's lead, the 10 training groups came to their respective training areas. Qin Wushuang's group had 60 advanced disciples. Apart from him, there were 2 upper sky warriors. The distribution of strength was relatively even. The leading deacon pointed to the entrance and said, after you enter, you must be careful. If you want to leave early, you must not go out easily. Because once the training area is activated, there will be a spiritual fence around it. You cannot leave easily. This spiritual fence is also to prevent the spiritual beasts from escaping after entering. With this spiritual fence, they will not be able to escape. You also don't have to worry about the loss of spiritual beasts. The total number will not change. It will depend on how you fight. Understood? Understood. That deacon waved his hand. Go in. 60 advanced disciples all rushed in. Amidst this giant wave, Qin Wushuang appeared extremely calm. However, as soon as he went in, he immediately sped up. His figure flickered a few times before disappearing from the trial forest alone. The trial area was 100 miles wide. It was quite difficult to find 60 spirit beasts in this area. However, this exam was different than the one in the Bayou country. That exam was to find the jade plates. The jade plates were dead, but the spiritual beasts were alive. To find the jade plates, they could rob each other. There was a lot of fighting and scheming. And to hunt the spiritual beasts, they could not rob each other. They could focus on hunting. To Qin Wushuang, the difficulty of this hunt was much easier than finding the jade plates. After all, at that time, Qin Wushuang was not at the upper sky realm and did not have the ability to sense the spiritual qi. And now, as soon as he initiated his upper sky qi, he could investigate the surrounding 10 miles in detail. To put it bluntly, even if he were to use a carpet search, he could find all 60 spiritual beasts as long as he had enough time. Compared to initial stage warriors at the same level, regardless of attack or defense, spiritual beasts at the initial stage were much weaker. However, to those pre-sky realm warriors, they were dangerous. Fortunately, these were the spiritual beasts raised by the Stargaze Palace. Although they were aggressive, the beast tamers had informed them that they were not allowed to kill Stargaze disciples. Or else, many of these advanced disciples were pre-sky realm warriors. Most likely, they would not be able to win against the spiritual beasts and get swallowed by them. Qin Wushuang rushed forward and used the snake-shaped soft whip to pave the way. He pretended to rush forward. Suddenly, he twisted his body and shot to the right as if he had suddenly made a turn. The snake-shaped soft whip in his hand sent out 3 circles of whip shadows and coiled around the dense foliage on the right. Chirp chirp, with a sharp cry, Qin Wushuang dragged a furry white sable before him like a giant mouse that was trapped inside the snake-shaped soft whip. Qin Wushuang chuckled and threw this white sable into his storage bag. 20 points. Suddenly, Qin Wushuang remembered something when he touched the storage bag. He reached in and grabbed an ancient scroll. Indeed, it was the catalogue of the beast he had acquired from that man in black when he had first entered the Virtuous Cloud mountain range to train. He still remembered clearly that at that time, that man in black had only moved his lips a few times and said a few words in the beast language. Then, he had attracted a large group of poisonous snake. Qin Wushuang opened this long scroll and skimmed through it from beginning to end. Inwardly, he thought that this beast language was too complicated. He would not be able to master it in 3 to 5 years. He wanted to see if there were any quick incantations that could actively communicate with spirit beasts or even lure them out. After a while, Qin Wushuang's eyes lit up. He had really found something similar. It was a simple piece of spirit beast language. There were more than a dozen simple phrases used to greet spirit beasts. Qin Wushuang looked at the incantation and imitated it on the spot according to the pronunciation written on it. Wu gu la, ha chan I bo wa, chun cun air. Qin Wushuang recited this strange pronunciation. He had no idea what it meant. He only felt that these incoherent pronunciations could not be described with human language. After reciting it a few times, Qin Wushuang finally grasped this phrase. He recited it a few more times in his heart. He did not have much confidence in it and did not know if it would be useful. As if he was learning how to speak, Qin Wushuang was a little embarrassed to open his mouth. Fortunately, this trial area was wide and there was no one around to watch. This gave Qin Wushuang courage. His voice was neither fast nor slow. He picked up the incantation word by word. Wu gu la. At first, Qin Wushuang felt that he did not have a good grasp of the incantation. Then, he twirled his tongue and imitated it 2 more times. Gradually, he got the hang of it. He felt an indescribable awkwardness in his heart. He thought to himself, talking to animals is indeed not something that ordinary people can do. However, what Qin Wushuang did not expect was that as a monk who had just learned to chant scriptures, He really had some affinity with Buddhism. As he recited the beast language, he immediately sensed it with his spiritual sense. He clearly heard rustling sounds all around, and the sound of spirit beasts running over could be heard. It was so effective? Qin Wushuang was delighted. Today's 4 chapters are very late. Sorry. Tomorrow's 4 chapters are still the same. Li Tian will try to finish early. Yes, it's the 3rd last day. I still have to ask for monthly vote. In the final battle, any name is a great honor. Fighting for honor, no matter how tired I am, I will fight. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 217. To a pre-sky realm martial artist, most likely, they would not be able to hear this voice as it was as soft as a mosquito. However, to Qin Wushuang it was extremely clear. Overjoyed, Qin Wushuang continued to show a harmless expression and kept repeating that nonsensical beast language. In a moment, 5 or 6 spiritual beasts of different shapes and sizes poked their heads out. Only these little guys were still on guard. They did not let down their guard against this Qin Wushuang with a bad accent. Qin Wushuang felt extremely surprised as he thought, could it be that the words I said are the same as the English from my former world, an international language? How come all kinds of spiritual beasts can understand this? Or is it because I have a strong personality that these spiritual beasts were attracted by my upper sky presence? Regardless of the reason, Qin Wushuang decided to make a move. Although he felt that learning their language and using this method to lure them would hurt his personality. However, since he would not harm their lives, he could complete his task after capturing 5 spiritual beasts. When he thought here, Qin Wushuang raised his right arm lightly. He shook the snake-shaped soft whip lightly and shot out a beautiful arc along with the movement of his arm. Instantly, it formed 5 waves of spiritual chi ripples that rolled out at the same time. Whoosh! Instantly, the 5 initial stage spiritual beasts were surrounded by the spiritual chi. He swung the whip back and captured them one by one. At such a close distance, plus they were not on guard against Qin Wushuang, all of them had become captives after Qin Wushuang's move. Qin Wushuang twitched his mouth into a smile and continued to use his suffocated beast language to comfort them while gesturing. The general idea was, "Little guys, don't worry, I caught you guys for an errand, I will not harm your lives." It was unknown if Qin Wushuang's beast language was effective, or if it had something to do with his natural affinity. Those little guys were not afraid after being caught by him. Instead, each of them opened their eyes wide and looked at Qin Wushuang. Apparently, they were curious about this young man who understood the beast language. For your information, even the beast tamers from the Stargaze Palace only knew simple beast language. Most of them still used hand gestures to communicate. It was impossible for him to master the systematic beast language. Although Qin Wushuang did not have a systematic grasp of the language, the few sentences he used to communicate with the spirit beasts were complete sentences and not simple phrases or nouns. This naturally surprised the spirit beasts. Including the spirit beast from before and the 5 spirit beasts this time, Qin Wushuang had already captured 6 spirit beasts. In this way, it was more than enough for him to get full marks. It seemed that it would be difficult to survive in the Stargaze Palace without establishing a good relationship with the 8 Shakyamuni. Each of the 8 Shakyamuni in the Stargaze Palace had their own duties. They were all people with high authority in the Stargaze Palace. After the review, that examiner recorded a big perfect score on Qin Wushuang's last report. He gave a thumbs up and sighed. "Qin Wushuang, did you know? You've broken the record that's been sealed for 16 years. Good job." Qin Wushuang smiled and did not show off. To many of the upper sky disciples, This last round of exam was not difficult. After the exam, almost all the Upper Sky elite warriors from each exam site had obtained a perfect score, and the gap between the pre-Sky Realm warriors had widened again. However, regardless of how high the scores of the other Upper Sky warriors had obtained in the last round, they could not shake Qin Wushuang's position as the champion. Everyone did not even care about who had advanced. The entire Stargaze Palace was spreading a message. That was, another perfect score had appeared. Finally, the 16-year-old record had appeared again. And this time, the person who had obtained this result did not come from the line of the head palace master. This was another brand new record. Once again, Qin Wushuang's name had become the most talked about person in the entire Stargaze Palace. Those martial arts students from the Bayou country were even more excited. They were as excited as if they had achieved this result themselves. Although none of the martial arts students from the Bayou country had obtained the qualification to advance in the initial disciple exam, they still felt excited. That night, these martial arts students gathered together and chatted excitedly. Especially He Zichong, he mumbled. Qin Wushuang is too monstrous. He became a core disciple in his first year in the Stargaze Palace. Shouldn't we feel ashamed? However, Tong Yen said, what are you ashamed of? Among all the disciples from the subordinate countries, besides Qin Wushuang, only one person had advanced. It was this person who had suffered the humiliation of kneeling under young Master Xing's feet. Haha, that Qi Yinfeng did have an exceptional strength. Unfortunately, he had encountered Marquis Wushuang. This meant that his life was destined to be filled with tragedy. Didn't he get killed by Marquis Wushuang, his grandpa that he was so proud of? When Simon Xing thought about the end of the Great Wu, he felt extremely happy. Previously, he had been holding a grudge when he was injured by the martial arts students from the Great Wu. In fact, that Qi Yinfeng is also a disaster. Wan Jinping said in a low voice. What disaster? Even his grandpa could not defeat Marquis Wushuang, could he do better? So what if he had become an advanced disciple? Now, Marquis Wushuang is already a core disciple. Not only did the difference not decrease, it increased. He Zichong said angrily. Tong Yen, you are good friends with Qin Wushuang. After the core ranking competition, invite them to come together. The disciples of the Bai you can gather together. Regardless, this is our first year away from home, we can't be alone, right? Everyone looked at Tong Yen. Tong Yen nodded. I mentioned it to him before, and he didn't seem to object. Now, let's not go find him. The core ranking competition is about to start, we cannot distract him. Yes. Simon Xing nodded and agreed. The higher Marquis Wushuang's grade, the more face our Bayou will have. Hopefully, this time, he can make it to the top 30. That would be good. I think more than that. Wan Jinping said. Tong Yen, what rank do you think he will make? Tong Yen said seriously. From my teacher's estimation, Shakyamuni Li Hua, Marquis Wushuang even has the strength to make it to the top 10. Top 10? Everyone was shocked. Everyone remembered that even Wei Yi had missed the top 10 when he had obtained perfect scores in all 6 of the advanced disciple exams 16 years ago and entered the core ranking. He had barely been pushed to the 11th place. If Qin Wushuang could truly make it to the top 10, then he would have surpassed Wei Yi's glory from that year. Indeed, this honor would be incredible. Top 10. If Marquis Wushuang could make it to the top 10, our Bayou would have truly become rich. He Zichong sighed. Regardless, Marquis Wushuang is destined to be a legend in our Bayou country. Thinking back to when he had just emerged and won first place in the martial arts student exam, I was somewhat unconvinced. Now, it seems, how could trash like us have the qualifications to doubt his grade? We don't even have the qualifications to be jealous of him. Different from these martial arts students from the Bayou, the martial arts students from the Great Wu could only force a happy face to celebrate Qi Yinfeng's promotion. However, even for Qi Yinfeng, He could not feel happy. There was no other reason. Qi Shengnan's death had hit him too hard. Before Qin Wushuang, he even felt a sense of powerlessness that he had never felt before. For such a giant figure, even if he wanted to seek revenge, he would most likely never catch up to Qin Wushuang's achievements. Boss Qi, the dead cannot come back to life. You must restrain your grief. Regardless, the future of the Great Wu still depends on us, the younger generation. If even we lose our fighting spirit, then the Great Wu would truly have no hope. One of the martial arts students tried to persuade him. Qi Yinfeng nodded. Don't worry, I will not give up. Regardless of how difficult the road ahead is, I will never give up. You guys too, never say give up. Even if the disciples from the bayou provoke and bully us, we must endure the humiliation and not cause any more trouble. I don't believe that the Great Wu will not have a day to rise up. P.S. Today it's still 4 chapters, try to deliver it before 21:30 p.m. A copy of Wealthy Families, book number 1736660. In this mediocre era, the ordinary people worked hard to climb up and looked up at the riches and honor of the wealthy families. However, they did not understand that under the bright and dazzling outer clothing, the struggle of the higher-ups was no less than the struggle of the little people. Drifting in the circle of wealth and power, one would not be able to protect themselves with the slightest carelessness. Let's see how a domineering, ostentatious, and rebellious man would go against the current in this black-bellied and shrewd society. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 218. Qin Wushuang had obtained a perfect score in all 6 categories. Immediately, this record would be recorded in the history of the Stargaze Palace. Among them, Tan Zhongqi was the happiest. Finally, the line of the Green Cloud Palace had achieved a breakthrough in his hand. He had broken the monopoly of the head palace master's line. Inside the Green Cloud Palace, cheers and laughter filled the entire place. Everyone was celebrating Qin Wushuang's new record. This was an honor that belonged to the Green Cloud Palace and the pride of the entire palace. Besides the line of the head palace master, no other palace had ever touched this record. Qin Wushuang had broken it. From this point, the Green Cloud Palace had a new record. Just this point alone was enough to suppress the other 3 palaces. Some of the younger disciples of the Green Cloud Palace were already celebrating with tears in their eyes. Finally, they could hold their heads high. On the contrary, Qin Wushuang was the calmest. From his point of view, it was not a difficult challenge for him to obtain a perfect score in all 6 categories. To put it bluntly, he did not even use all of his strength. Of course, he would not say such words out loud. For the advanced disciple exam, besides Qin Wushuang, one of the top 3 came from the line of the head palace master, and the other one came from the line of the 4th palace master. The 4th and 5th place could not advance directly. They could only fight with the last 4 and 5th place of the core disciple exam. They would fight for the remaining 2 spots through martial arts, and the bottom 3 of the core disciples would be demoted directly. The top 3 of the advanced disciple exam would replace their spot. For the line of the 2nd palace master, besides Qin Wushuang, no one else would be demoted. This way, the final number of core disciples would always be 96. Only, the line of the 2nd palace master had 1 more core disciple spot. Initially, there were 12 people. This time, they did not get demoted, and Qin Wushuang had entered the ranks of the core disciples as number 1. This spot would not be shaken. On the 2nd day, Tan Zhongqi's footsteps toward the main palace were much lighter. Although his expression was still as serious as usual, the trace of joy from the corner of his eyes and the corner of his mouth could not be concealed. When he arrived at the main palace, the other palace masters had already gathered. Zhuobuchuan, the head palace master, came up with a smile. Second, nice job, congratulations. Tan Zhongqi chuckled and said, Grand Hall Master, to be honest, I didn't contribute much. After Qin Wushuang entered the sect, I didn't teach him any technique. It's his own hard work. It has nothing to do with me. Although he said that, he still felt a little proud in his heart. The first palace master smiled and said, A teacher imparts knowledge and dispels doubts. Imparting skills was only one aspect. The most important aspect of a teacher's Tao was not imparting skills, but imparting the Tao. This Tao was all-encompassing. This included the shaping of personality, temperament, and realm. Second, Qin Wushuang is the future pillar of the Stargaze Palace. In the future, you will need to train him. Yes, there's no need for First Hall Master to instruct me on this. Zhuobuchuan nodded. Okay, today, after the 4th and 5th place of the advanced disciples and the 4th and 5th from the bottom of the core disciples have finished, the list of 96 core disciples has been confirmed. Tomorrow will be the new core ranking competition. Does anyone have any objections? Ling Qiuqi, the 4th palace master, said, The rules are the same every year. Of course, we have no objections. The other palace masters all nodded to show that they had no objections. Since everyone has no objections, then it will be the same old rules. The 96 core disciples will be ranked according to the exam result. The top 32 will not participate in the first round, and the bottom 64 will fight in pairs to determine the 32 spot. Together with the top 32, a total of 64 people will enter the second round, and so on until the final round. Zhuobuchuan repeated the rules again. After he made sure that no one had any objections, he continued. The 32 people who were disqualified in the first round will be ranked according to their exam results. They will be ranked from 65 all the way to 96. After each round of disqualification, we will rank the disqualified core disciples, and this ranking will be based on their previous exam result. Tan Zhongqi nodded and said, Head Palace Master, everyone understands the rules. Only after entering the top 16, the exam results will not be used. Even after being disqualified, we will still have to fight to determine the exact ranking of the top 16. To put it simply, the ranking after the top 16 will be based on the exam result. And for the top 16, each of them will have to fight to determine the ranking. Zhuobuchuan nodded with a smile. Second is right, these are the rules. And the old rules, the top 16 from last year will still be seeded. They will not participate in the first few rounds to ensure that they will not meet each other before the top 32 are formed. This way, to a certain extent, it will prevent the elite from meeting each other and getting disqualified early. Of course, if they do not work hard and get disqualified by opponents other than the seeded ones, then they can only blame themselves for not working hard this year, or their bad luck. This rule was also the old tradition of the Stargaze Palace. Of course, no one would raise any objections. After all palace heads had reached a consensus, the rules of the core ranking competition had been set. Zhuobuchuan glanced around and said with a smile, For this ranking competition, our rewards are also higher than usual. Especially the rewards for the top 10. Everyone, no one has any objections, right? This is the result of the discussion between the 5 palace masters. Whoever has objections, wouldn't that be opposing themselves? Tian Zhixing, the 5th palace master, laughed. Head palace master, next year, it seems it will be another cycle of 20 years, right? Zhuobuchuan gave a long sigh. Time flies like an arrow, and time does not spare us. 60 years ago, we were all young disciples and went to participate in the friendly competition between the 3 Eastern empires. Now, the 3 kingdoms' friendly competition had already been held 3 times. Our young generation is also growing up. Next year's competition will be held at the Heavenly Lake Empire. To the Great Luo Empire, the situation is not favorable. The so-called three Eastern Empires referred to the three middle-ranking empires in the eastern part of the Tian land. They were the Great Luo, the Heavenly Lake, and the Vermilion Empire. These three empires were distributed in a triangle shape and formed the strongest group of powerhouses in the eastern part of the Tian land. Between the three of them, they did not have any strong relationship. From time to time, there would even be conflict. However, between the three middle-ranking empires, it was different than the subordinate countries. They restrained and restricted each other. On the contrary, the probability of starting a war was not as direct as between the subordinate countries. After all, when it came to a war between the middle-ranking empires, a slight move in one part would affect the whole situation. On the contrary, it would not be easy to start an all-out war. After all, the destructive power would be too great. Between these three empires, they often interacted with each other. For example, this friendly competition that was held once every 20 years was the best way for the three empires to understand each other. The three empires placed great importance on each other. Each time, they would send out their strongest team to suppress the other two empires and gain a prominent position among the three Eastern empires. The relationship between the Heavenly Lake Empire and the Great Luo Empire had never been harmonious. In the history of the friendly competition between the three empires, whenever it was held in the Heavenly Lake Empire, the Great Luo Empire would not achieve a good result. They almost always came in last place. Of course, overall, the Heavenly Lake Empire's record was not outstanding, but not bad. Only, they had not gotten the championship of the friendly competition for a few years. Thus, when talking about this matter, Zhuobufen's mood was rather heavy. Head Palace Master, for next year's friendly competition, will we still follow the same rules and send the top 10 core disciples to participate? Suddenly, Tan Zhongqi asked. All previous friendly competitions have been like this, of course, there will be no exception. Tan Zhongqi asked in a low voice. Then this time, what kind of position is the Stargaze Palace aiming for among the three empires? Zhuobuchuan waved his hand. For the friendly competition hosted by the Heavenly Lake Empire, we should try not to come in last place. It would not be too late to set a higher goal when it's the Great Luo's turn to host it next time. Let's not set a goal yet, we only need to remember these 4 words to do our best. The other palace masters all nodded with a serious expression. This friendly competition between the three empires was not as simple as a simple competition. Behind the scenes, it involved the competition between the powerhouses of the three empires. Undercurrents were surging in the open and in the dark. The results of this friendly competition would most likely determine the diplomatic strategy between the empires in the next 20 years. It would also determine the strength of the sects in the three empires. Okay. Naturally, Zhuobuchuan did not want this matter to affect everyone's mood. Everyone, go back and tell everyone what you need to know. After today's extra competition, the core ranking competition will start tomorrow. Tomorrow at 7 a.m. we will start drawing lot. All the palace masters showed a serious expression. Apparently, the most crucial moment of the year had arrived. The results of the core disciple ranking competition would determine the success or failure of the various palaces this year. If they did not get a good result, they would not enjoy the new year. If they got a good result, they would feel more comfortable after the new year. When Tan Zhongqi returned to the Green Cloud Palace, he immediately gathered all the core disciples. Of course, Qin Wushuang was among them. Tomorrow, the core ranking competition will start officially. The rules are the same as before. The top 32 will not participate in the first round. The top 16 are all seeded candidates. Before entering the top 32, the seeded candidates will not meet each other. Fu Er, Lviting, Jianrui, you three entered the top 16 last year. You are all seeded candidates. Tianrun, 5th and 6th were all in the top 32 last year. Thus, the first round has nothing to do with you guys. Now, you guys need to prepare for the second round. Starting from Zhou Fu, the top 6 disciples all nodded to show their understanding. They had participated in the core disciple ranking competition many times, so they knew the details like the back of their hands. Only, to Qin Wushuang, this was the first time he had participated in the competition. Naturally, he needed to give some special instructions. This was also the biggest reason why Tan Zhongqi had gathered everyone. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 219. Tan Zhongqi looked at the other 7 people. All 7 of you, including Wushuang, must participate in the first round. Of course, in the first round there are no seeded candidates. Everyone's strength is similar. Whether you can advance or not, it will depend on the drawing of lots and your performance. Tan Zhongqi glanced at Qin Wushuang intentionally and smiled. Wushuang, you are a new disciple. Perhaps you don't understand some of the rules. Today, I will explain it to you. You are the champion of the Advanced Disciple exam. Among the 5 floating spots, you are ranked first. Of course, the 5 floating spots will be filled with the last 5 core disciples. According to the rules, your ranking will automatically be 92. Which means you are ranked the highest among the 5 floating spots. Of course, this ranking will not affect you in any way. For this duel, the ranking will be your number. However, the arrangement of the duels will not be arranged according to the first and last duels, but purely by drawing lots. Thus, before the result of the draw, none of you will know who your opponent will be. There is even a possibility that disciples from the same faction will fight against each other. Qin Wushuang pondered for a moment and nodded seriously to show that he had digested it. After the first round, the 32 winners will be mixed up with the 32 from last year. They will draw lots for the second time and fight against each other to determine the top 32. Then, it will be the 3rd round, the 4th round, until the champion is decided. Tan Zhongqi explained in detail. In the top 16, any small ranking will have to be decided through duels. And for those who are ranked after the 16th, after each round of elimination, they will be ranked from the bottom to the top. For example, the 32 people who were eliminated in the first round will be ranked according to their ranking in this year's year-end exam. From 65 to 96 will be the corresponding ranking for those who were eliminated in the first round. Correspondingly, the 32 people who were eliminated in the second round will be ranked from 33 to 64 according to their exam ranking. Those who were eliminated in the third round will be ranked from 17 to 32. This way, do you understand? Tan Zhongqi asked. Qin Wushuang nodded. I understand. Tan Zhongqi said. Thus, in the first 3 rounds, you must give it your all. It's because if you are eliminated in these 3 rounds, your ranking will be affected because you are ranked 92. You will be in a disadvantageous position in the corresponding ranking. Once you pass the first 3 rounds and enter the top 16, it will be easy. Any small ranking inside will be decided through individual duels. Even the 15th and 16th will have to duels. Your unfavorable words will not have any effect on the assessment. I understand. Up to this point, Qin Wushuang had completely understood the rules. Of course, Qin Wushuang would not put himself in the mindset of a weakling. Regarding the strength of the younger generation of the Stargaze Palace, he had already seen the 5 most exceptional people from the 5 palaces when he had signed up for the gambling competition. Other than Wei Yi, who had a higher cultivation level, perhaps only senior sister Zhou Fu was the strongest. For the other 3 head disciples, Qin Wushuang knew that he would not lose to them. Tan Zhongqi glanced across each person's face and said in a low voice, I will say one more thing. Regardless of anything, you cannot cheat during the drawing of lot. If among you guys, you are unlucky enough to have a duel with your fellow disciples, you can determine the winner. However, you must not ruin your relationship with your fellow disciples. Who is strong and who is weak will speak with strength. You must not have any dissatisfaction or hostility, understand? Yes. Since Tan Zhongqi had spoken, of course, these disciples would treat it as the golden rule. In fact, last year, his line had already had a duel between disciples from the same line. The reason why he had instructed them was because he had spoken these words for Qin Wushuang. After all, Qin Wushuang was new. If he met a senior brother from the same line and got eliminated, most likely, he would feel embarrassed and cause some trouble. Thus, Tan Zhongqi had spoken these words to prevent such future troubles. After he had explained everything, Tan Zhongqi laughed straightforwardly and encouraged them. Don't put too much pressure on yourselves. The year-end exam happens every year and the core ranking competition happens every year. A year's worth of gains and losses is nothing. The ranking competition itself had a certain degree of coincidence. For us seniors, we will never look at the results of 1 or 2 ranking competitions when evaluating a disciple. Instead, we will look at 10 or 20 ranking competitions and evaluate them. Although this method of reducing pressure was not new, it was the truth. In this year's ranking competition, some disciples' rankings could very well be due to bad luck in drawing lots, causing them to miss the opportunity to charge towards a higher ranking. Sometimes, when they had the strength to aim for the top 16, they would meet one of the top 3 in the second round. One could easily imagine the result. Thus, when the Stargaze Palace evaluated the disciples, they would usually look at the ranking results over the years and not just once or twice. This way, they could also avoid some accident. Again, as long as you give it your all, the results are not the only thing I care about. I have a goal, but my goal depends on everyone's hard work. As an individual, as long as you give it your all, whether you achieve your goal or not is secondary. Indeed, Tan Zhongqi was very forgiving to his disciples. For the other palaces, especially the line of the third palace master, they had set a hard target for their disciples. If they could not complete it, most likely they would be punished. Zhou Fu also stepped out at the appropriate time to relieve everyone's pressure. Junior brothers, teachers' intentions are clear. For the line of the Green Cloud Palace, as long as we give it our all, regardless of the final result, it will only be a temporary gain. In order for the Green Cloud Palace to develop, strengthen and contribute more to the Stargaze Palace, everyone must work together and have a strong will. You don't need to carry the extra burden. Just enjoy the competition. Standing in Zhou Fu's position, she did not have any burden to speak of. Unless she did not believe that she had met the strongest way, or else, her name would be in the top 3. Now, she was more curious about how many rounds this new junior brother Wushuang could make it to. Could he enter the top 16, or even the top 10? Apparently, teacher had placed his hopes on junior brother Wushuang to be in the top 10. However, even that senior brother Wei did not make it to the top 10 when he had just become a core disciple. He only made it to the 11th place. If junior brother Wushuang could make it to the top 10, it would be another record. After disbanding, Qin Wushuang remembered the promise he made with Yan Feng. Since he had some free time today, he decided to end this old relationship. Apparently, that Yan Feng intended to befriend Qin Wushuang. Through repeated observation, Qin Wushuang felt that Yan Feng had a good personality and could be considered a reliable person. Of course, he was happy to form a good relationship with him. In the future, he would need this person's help. In the advanced disciple exam, Yan Feng had made it to the 32nd place. This had greatly increased his prestige within the sect. After all, the advanced disciples were around 30 upper sky warriors. Naturally, it was an impressive result for him to make it to the 32nd place. Qin Wushuang knew that for sure. This Yan Feng would be cruising around the 5 palaces and waiting for him to find him. Since there were 2 additional matches today, Yan Feng would most likely go to watch the fun. When he thought here, Qin Wushuang walked towards the location of the additional matches. Naturally, the additional matches were set in front of the main palace. Before Qin Wushuang arrived, he saw Yan Feng's figure from afar. Although this Yan Feng was watching the matches, he was obviously absent-minded. Apparently, he was still thinking about the promise he made with Qin Wushuang. He wanted to go to the Green Cloud Palace to find Qin Wushuang, but he was afraid that he would be kicked out by the people of the Green Cloud Palace due to his low status. Just when he was worrying about his personal gains and losses, suddenly, someone patted his shoulder. He immediately turned around and saw Qin Wushuang standing in front of him with a smile. "Senior brother Qin, when did you come?" "Just arrived, follow me." Qin Wushuang led the way from the front and took Yan Feng to a deviated corner. After making sure that no one was around, he took out the 2 pills he had prepared beforehand. 1 physical body pill, and 1 supreme quality upper sky initial stage pill. Qin Wushuang said with a solemn expression, "Yan Feng, this pill is not easy to get, you must treasure it." When he heard that it was the supreme quality, upper sky initial stage pill, Yan Feng could not help but swallow his saliva. He could not believe his ears. Earlier, his wish was to get an upper sky initial stage pill. In this lifetime, he would be satisfied if he could make a dash for the upper sky. However, he never dared to dream that he could get the supreme quality upper sky initial stage pill. Once one consumed the supreme quality upper sky initial stage pill that gathered all 5 basic attributes, not only would he enter the upper sky with 100% certainty, it also contained rich spiritual qi that could greatly increase a martial artist's potential. In the Stargaze Palace, disciples who had consumed the upper sky initial stage pill to enter the upper sky were not qualified to become a core disciple. However, the supreme quality upper sky initial stage pill was an exception. The supreme quality upper sky initial stage pill had even more obvious advantages than self-understanding. Overjoyed, Yan Feng's right hand that took the pill almost trembled. "Don't be excited, take it. A long night will bring many dreams. After you take it, return to your teacher and absorb the effects of the pill. In 3 months you will enter the upper sky. Remember, don't be hasty. The first step in the training of the upper sky is to do it step by step." In his former world, Qin Wushuang had suffered a loss from taking risk. Of course, he knew the profoundness behind it. He instructed carefully. Yan Feng was moved to tears. He only nodded and said with a choked voice, "Senior brother Qin, you and I have never met before, and you are representing me like this. Yan Feng's life is yours from now on, senior apprentice brother Qin. Even my master didn't have the grace of being reborn like senior martial brother Qin." Qin Wushuang waved his hand. "Don't be in a rush to express your opinion. You don't need to reveal our relationship." "Yes, senior brother Qin, then I will go back first." Yan Feng was filled with gratitude. He waved goodbye and regretfully said, "Senior apprentice brother Qin, I won't be able to cheer for you in the core disciple ranking competition. But I believe that with your strength, you will definitely be able to enter the top 10. Go." Qin Wushuang smiled lightly and waved his hand to send Yan Feng away. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 220. After settling the matter with Yan Feng, Qin Wushuang had no more worries and his thoughts were clear. The goal in his heart was the core disciple ranking competition. Shakyamuni Lihua had made 7 of these upper sky initial stage pills. Among them, Shakyamuni Lihua took 1 and gave 1 to his teacher. Then, he gave 1 to the purple-robed great honored warrior to create a martial saint. Now, he had given 1 to Yan Feng, which meant he had given away 4. There were 3 left. Qin Wushuang had already reserved 2 of them for his father and brother-in-law, de Shi Ming. In other words, there was only one upper sky initial stage pill left for him. The rest would be those ordinary upper sky initial stage pills. That night, Qin Wushuang stayed alone in the secret room and once again, he refined the spiritual qi in his sea of consciousness. He used the spiritual qi to circulate one cycle after another in his body. Although he could not find any flaws or discomfort in his body, he did not dare to neglect. When he had the time, he would not forget to use his spiritual qi to test it out. After that absorption in the spiritual qi formation, Qin Wushuang felt that the spiritual qi in his body had become much more abundant. Although he did not know how far he was from the middle stage, one thing was for sure. If he continued to work hard in this direction, the middle stage would not be too late. He had a premonition that by relying on the power of Deep North, a technique that defied the natural order, his training at the upper sky spiritual martial force was equivalent to having a cheating tool. His training speed would be much faster than others. In other words, as long as his body was strong enough and he had a sufficient source of spiritual qi, he could absorb it endlessly. Of course, he would not do it that way. Qin Wushuang knew very well that one would not be able to eat a big fat person in one bite. On the path of training, only by accumulating small steps could one reach 1,000 miles. Only by accumulating small streams could one become a vast sea. After training for half the night, Qin Wushuang felt that all the spiritual qi in his sea of qi had completely formed into a whole. He knew that the more he merged, the purer the spiritual qi would be, and the more power he could unleash. After finishing his cultivation, Qin Wushuang cleared his mind of distracting thoughts and entered a meditative state. He rested for half a night and unknowingly, dawn was breaking. A new day had arrived. This day could be said to be the most exciting day for the Stargaze Palace in a year. This was because the grand finale of every year, the ranking of the core disciples, was about to begin. Although this was only a competition between the 96 core disciples, it affected the hearts of all the Stargaze disciples. Although they could not participate, they looked forward to this core disciple competition. During the process of watching the battle, they imagined that one day they would stand on the entire stage and beat the heroes from all directions with their fists. How glorious would that be? Some of them couldn't help but think of themselves as one of the core disciples, cheering for that person madly. In general, this core ranking competition had stirred the appetite of everyone in the Stargaze Palace. Including those old guys, they could not help but feel excited. All 96 core disciples, including the 5 newest ones, were present. On the stage, the 5 palace masters sat in the front row. The 8 Shakyamuni and 16 elders sat in the second and third rows. The palace emissaries and some other higher-ups also found their own seat. Zhuobuchuan, the head palace master, looked around with a smile and said in a clear voice, "Those standing here are the 96 core disciples with the most potential. For today's pageant, you are the main characters. I hope you will bring out your best skills and contribute to a wonderful ranking competition for all the disciples of the Stargaze Palace. Do you guys have the confidence?" "Yes." Zhuobuchuan nodded with satisfaction. "Good, same old rules. For the top 32 core disciples, you guys will not participate in the first round. You can be a spectator. As for the remaining 64 core disciples, the numbers corresponding to your ranking have already been arranged. Do you see this big circle on the stage? Here are the lots for the 64 of you. The 5 of us palace masters will take turns to draw. Each of you will take out 2 numbers. The 2 numbers you take out will be your opponents in the first round. Understood?" "Understood." The head palace master clapped his hands with a smile and called the other 4 palace masters to stand up. All 5 palace masters stood before that big circle. "For palace masters, please supervise. Now I am messing up all the numbers." Zhuobuchuan kept waving his arm and messed up all the numbers. Then, he turned around and asked those 4 palace masters, "Everyone, did you see it clearly?" Those 4 palace masters all nodded. "No problem. Okay, 5th palace master, please take out 2 numbers. Zhuobuchuan, the head palace master said with a smile. Tian Zhixing did not hold back as he walked up with a smile. He took out 2 numbers and opened them to look. Then, he announced, 38 against 75. The 2 core disciples who had been called stretched out their heads and looked around for their opponent. They wanted to see if they were familiar faces. They were only satisfied when they confirmed that they were not their opponent. When it was Ling Qiuqi, the 4th palace master's turn, he also took out 2 numbers, 45 against 48. The ranking of these 2 numbers were close. It seemed that they were evenly matched. Zhong Wuyin, the 3rd palace master, went up and also took out 2 numbers. When he opened them, his expression changed slightly. He really wanted to slap his own hand. What kind of bad luck was this? The 2 people he had taken out in the first round were 2 disciples from the same faction. 35 against 51. Zhong Wuyin announced helplessly. Inwardly, he cursed his bad luck and mumbled, "Did I not wash my hands before I went out today? Why am I so unlucky as soon as I started?" After Zhong Wuyin had drawn the numbers, naturally, it was Qin Wushuang's teacher, Tan Zhongqi's turn. His draw was rather average. There was no one from his disciple and nothing special. Just when he was about to walk away, suddenly, the head palace master laughed. "Second, please mess up the numbers again to avoid the possibility of me cheating." Tan Zhongqi nodded and messed up the numbers again. Then, Zhuobuchuan went up to draw. This way, the 5 palace masters would take turns. After each round, there would be 10 spots and 5 groups of 5 would compete. Qin Wushuang's number 92 was drawn in the 3rd round. The one who had drawn him was Ling Qiuqi, the 4th palace master. He shouted, 68 against 92. When that number 68 heard this result, he was overjoyed. He said with joy, "Ha ha, my opponent's ranking is low. In the first round, it seems that my chances have increased greatly." Immediately, he looked around and asked, "By the way, do you guys know who is number 92? In total, there were 64 people participating in the draw. It was easy to find someone. Soon, someone saw the change in Qin Wushuang's body. Thinking about how self-satisfied number 68 was, he could not help but mock. "Congratulations, your opponent is one of the top 3 in the advanced disciple exam." "Is that so? Who is it?" "Oh, if I remember correctly, his name should be Qin Wushuang." Number 68 was dumbfounded. He cried out involuntarily, "Qin Wushuang." With a sorrowful sigh, he was initially full of joy as he thought he had met a soft persimmon. However, when he heard it was Qin Wushuang, his breath instantly deflated like a balloon that had been pierced by a needle. He muttered, "Why am I so unlucky? Am I going to be defeated in the draw for 2 consecutive years? Heavens, you're so unfair. My luck is getting worse every year. Is my moral character that bad?" Qin Wushuang. Oh my God! Who was Qin Wushuang? The champion of the advanced disciple exam, full marks in all 6 categories. The outside world was optimistic that he would enter the top 16, and even have the strength to enter the top 10. It could even be said that his strength was at the level of a seeded contestant. However, due to the rules, the advanced disciples had to participate in the first round of the exam. Compared to his opponent's lamenting, Qin Wushuang's state of mind was incomparably calm. Without the participation of the top 32 in the first round, to Qin Wushuang, it would not be difficult. Most likely, even Li Wuji would be inferior to these core disciples after the 32. Earlier, Qin Wushuang had killed Li Wuji. Now, after such a long period of training, of course, there was no reason for him to fail. In the first round of the draw, Besides the disciples from the third palace master meeting with each other, there was also a battle between disciples from the head palace master. When the result of the draw came out, 32 pairs of 64 people had found each other's opponent. The next stop was the martial arts stage of the Stargaze Palace. The martial arts stage of the Stargaze Palace was located on the north side of the Stargaze Palace. It was a giant high platform with an extremely wide area. According to the 8 trigrams, 64 small martial arts stages had been built. They surrounded a giant Tai Chi 8 trigrams in the middle and had an extremely wide terrain. Even that small martial arts stage was at least 300 meters in length and width. It was the most suitable place for a martial arts competition. As Qin Wushuang looked at this majestic martial arts stage, inwardly, he also felt a sense of shock. He must admit that any scenery in the Stargaze Palace had a form of awe-inspiring beauty. In this giant martial arts stage and 60 small martial arts stages, one could not even see the boundary between them. I am afraid that only by flying in the sky, one could see the entire scene of this giant martial arts stage? Qin Wushuang thought inwardly. He must admit that Qin Wushuang and the line of the fifth palace master were fated. That number 68 was also a disciple from the line of the fifth palace master, Tian Zhixing. Under the guidance of the referee, the two of them arrived at their respective martial arts stage. Qin Wushuang stood on the stage with his hands behind his waist. Like a statue, his entire body revealed a cold expression as he glanced at number 68. Make your move. Qin Wushuang swung the long whip in his hand. Like countless dancing silver dragons, the whip shadows in the sky shook out all kinds of illusory ripples. That number 68 only felt a wave of dizziness. He straightened the long spear in his hand, gritted his teeth and gave a loud shout. Then, he stabbed towards Qin Wushuang's face. The one who strikes first gains the upper hand, the one who strikes later suffers. With this thought, number 68 made his move with a poisonous move. Only, in the eyes of Qin Wushuang, such spear technique was an insignificant skill. Like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue, he stretched out the head of the whip and wrapped it around that spearhead. When the two waves of power clashed in the sky, the collision of the upper sky chi shook the sky with a chi-chi sound. In between this collision, the atmosphere had reached its climax. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com, support the author, support the original reading. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.